We are live. What is up, Bitcoiners? How's it going? Matt Odell. This is CK calling in from Bitcoin's 12th birthday in BTC Studios. How's it going, Matt?
Fuck yes, I'm hyped. That was the first time I got to see that intro video.
Yeah, dude. Tommy did his magic again. We're going to be playing that a bunch. So if you missed it, I'm sure you haven't, but it was fire. So, you guys, Proof of Keys Day, Bitcoin's birthday. It's a day where we want to teach you guys about self sovereign Bitcoin usage. This year, I think in particular, 2020, Bitcoin has gotten a lot easier to use correctly, right? It was much more difficult to run a node, use multisig, do proper air gapped cold storage before this year. Like it really was a huge year for that. Matt was really leading the charge with education there, so I'm excited to have you here to do this special presentation. Matt, what does proof of keys mean to you?
Dude, insanely bullish day. Bullish year in terms of just ease of access into using Bitcoin properly. I think proof of keys is, this is the third ever proof of keys. It's the 12th birthday of Bitcoin's Genesis block. It's Bitcoin's 12th anniversary. Proof of keys historically maybe have meant different things to different people, but to me, I think proper Bitcoiners every day should be proof of keys, because I think if you're not holding your own keys, if you're not securing your own Bitcoin, you're not actually using Bitcoin. You're using an IOU. So I want to see going forward, and I'm really looking forward to this day that we built out here. Really on a focus on just basically Bitcoiners trying to practice, use these best practices every day of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really excited to have some of our guests on because they have really been pushing Bitcoin self sovereign usage forward. One of our guests in particular, Wiz, has been chirping that every day is proof of keys day. Every day is a day for you to hold and maintain your own custody. Can you kind of talk philosophically as well as practically, like, why is it so important for Bitcoin that Bitcoin holders continue to manage their own keys and distribute, the pool of keys around individuals?
I think fundamentally, it's hard for people to grok at first this idea that you can actually secure your own wealth, that you can hold it yourself without a third party. And this is a key tenet of Bitcoin. This idea that you don't have to rely on a centralized third party to secure your money for you and secure your data for you. So that whole value prop of Bitcoin, this idea that you can be self-sovereign, that you can control your own keys, that you can use this permissionless money in a trust minimized environment and send money around the world without people controlling how you do that, is only possible if Bitcoiners practice self sovereignty and use these best practices. So I think obviously it's not going to be the easiest option. Personal responsibility will always be the more difficult option, but Bitcoin gives you that option, and ultimately we need at least a strong base of enthusiasts that are practicing those options, that are using Bitcoin to its full potential.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk about the program that we have lined up. Matt and I worked closely in bringing together really kind of awesome experts who are very neutral. That was one of our big goals here. Was we wanted to take a very neutral stance on how Bitcoiners can best protect themselves and stay sovereign. So we are starting off with a conversation between Matt and Ben Kaufman. Ben is a young and fiery developer who is building one of the coolest open source wallets out there, Spectre Wallet. So super excited to have him chat with Matt coming up next. And then after that, I'm jumping on with an AMA with Alex Gladstein. So for all you freaks out there, for all the Bitcoiners in the chat, we are going to be monitoring the chat and bringing out those questions. And then after that, we had a conversation which Matt just recorded with Wiz and Ketan. They were recording as Bitcoin was crossing 30K for the first time, and you can see it on the block clock behind them. I think, wait, you guys woke up super early just to match their time zones for this recording. How did that go, Matt?
That was a fun one. First of all, I love both those guys. I think the listeners are going to really enjoy that conversation. But yeah, I was up at 7 in the morning on a Saturday to match their time zone uh, while Bitcoin went through 30K, and we were just nerding out. We had absolutely no idea. You'll just see it ticking by on the clock behind me.
Dude, it's awesome, man. Bitcoin price right now is just the gift that keeps on giving. And after that piece of programming with Wiz and Ketan, I am going to be doing a 14-minute video walking you guys through how to go from zero to full node multi-sig usage on a MacBook Pro. I know a lot of millennials out there had a MacBook Pro from college. It's a very common computer out there. And I mean, believe me, it could not be easier to use Bitcoin correctly. If you used a prune node, it really doesn't even take up much space on your computer, so it could be your main everyday driver. So that is a good piece of content there. And then we're going to close it out with our famous marbles on the Bitcoin Twitch stream. We're going to be giving away tons of Satoshis over on Twitch and playing marbles. So we have a great community over there. And if you have not checked out marbles on Bitcoin Magazine Twitch, you definitely need to. It's a lot of fun. So that's how we're going to be closing it out. And yeah, guys, really excited to be putting together this piece of content for Proof of Keys Day and for Bitcoin's 12th birthday. All right, and with that, let's roll into our commercial and our very first piece of content. You're live.
Yo, I think we're live now. I do have you on the live chat. So to all you listeners out there, if you want to participate, give us a shout out in the live chat and we'll see if we can get some of your questions answered. Anyway, happy birthday, Bitcoin. I'm Matt Odell. This is the 12th birthday of Bitcoin. January 3rd was the Genesis block. I'm joined here by Ben Kaufman, young gun Bitcoin developer who's working on a project that I find very useful to every Bitcoiner called Spectre Wallet. How's it going, Ben?
Hey, doing good, doing great even. Yeah, happy Bitcoin birthday.
12 years. It's been a long fucking time. Bitcoin's come a long way. It's pretty crazy to see. On this day, historically, for the last 3 years, a group of Bitcoiners have been participating in something called Proof of Keys Day, a day where Bitcoiners take full sovereignty of their coins if they haven't already, if they have their coins on an exchange or a third party. I was wondering, and I think the listeners would be interested in hearing what your thoughts are on that tradition and just the overall concept of self-sovereignty in Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure. So on this tradition specifically, I think the idea in general is a good one, but it should be impractical because if you can if you can hold your own keys and hold your own Bitcoin, you should do this all the time. And if you can't, then you can't do this just for one day. You would probably screw something up. So I don't really see the idea of it really, to be honest. But it's another thing to celebrate, I guess, which is nice. And it reminds people to hold their own keys, which is also nice. And obviously about self-sovereignty more in general, of course, it's super important for Bitcoin to succeed, to stay resilient, to stay censorship resistant, to keep basically everything about Bitcoin. So if we want to keep 21 million guarantee, if we want to keep it censorship resistant, if we want to keep anything that makes Bitcoin what it is, we really need to hold our own keys, run our own nodes, just do it.
100%. Couldn't agree with you more. So I mean, I think the exact explanation of proof of keys has always been like remove your keys on January 3rd and then like maybe send them right back in or something. But I think the bigger purpose and the bigger benefit is more of an education push. And I think that's what we're trying to focus on today. This idea that this is best practice. This is how people should practice it all the time. This is how people should use Bitcoin all the time. And I think, especially on days like today where we've had massive price appreciation. I mean, it was $29,000 yesterday, and now it's over $34,000. Who even knows what the price is right now? We have all these people coming in. We have all these newcomers coming in. This is when people flow into Bitcoin. December has been an absolutely insane month in terms of price appreciation. So Ben, give the pitch to the new Bitcoiners. This is their first January 3rd. They have their money on an exchange. Maybe they went through a lengthy KYC process. They put their ID in. They have their Bitcoin. It's sitting in their balance, on a Cash App or a River or a Swan. What should they do? Why should they withdraw it? Give them that pitch.
Yeah, sure. I'll try my best. So basically, if you're not holding your own keys, you have no guarantee that you're holding Bitcoin. You can't really control it. You are trusting the exchange, the platform it's on. What you're holding is just an IOU for a Bitcoin. That IOU might be honored, it might not be honored. The state could, for some reason, say that the exchange has been doing, I don't know, some AML money laundering stuff, and then just take everything, and then your IOU is worth nothing. The exchange could go bankrupt for various reasons. It might be fractional reserve, or basically anything, and then you're just dependent on that exchange to hold your coins for you. You're just holding an IOU. So of course, if you're not holding Bitcoin, you're just holding an IOU, then you're not enjoying any of the benefits of Bitcoin. You're not enjoying the censorship resistance. So you're dependent on them to give you or not give you your coins, or allow you to withdraw to some address but not other address, or whatever, basically. So you're simply holding something which is not Bitcoin. It's just a matter of the price. If you really want to support Bitcoin, to be part of this thing, then you have to learn how to hold it yourself, learn how to use it. I know for some it might not be that easy, but this is what you have to do if you really want to be part of this movement.
I mean, I think what a lot of people don't realize here is when it comes to digital money, there really is no traditional money counterpart here. If you're using a traditional money app, I don't know what they have by you, but in America, at least, we have things like Venmo and PayPal and Cash App. You can't actually withdraw the money and hold the money yourself. You can't pull it out of the ATM. But with Bitcoin, it's a digital money that you're able to actually withdraw and hold in your own personal wallet, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So basically, I think maybe with Americans, because it's usually easier for Americans, so you don't have that much censorship, although there are obviously a lot of industries which do have. So for a lot of people, they don't really feel that sometimes, but around the world, I think a lot of people can really easily understand why holding your own money is extremely important. It happens all the time that somebody gets censored from platform like PayPal, like Venmo, whatever, and just loses their money, gets locked out. I think even in America, if I remember correctly, this happens quite a lot. So you can't really trust these companies. They can just decide that, okay, we don't like you, we don't like something that you're doing. We see platforms like YouTube censoring certain opinions, certain even political opinions or whatever. We just can't trust these guys with your money. You just have to protect it yourself, or it will be taken away.
So Bitcoin fixes this, but only if you use Bitcoin in a way that you're not trusting these third parties, that you're not trusting these custodians, because you can use Bitcoin in the same exact way that you mentioned. You can use it in a way where PayPal holds it for you. And if you do that, then you're restricted the same exact way you are with traditional digital money. So it's imperative for people to actually pull this Bitcoin off of these third party services and hold it themselves. Now, when we say hold it to themselves, obviously there's a gap here, right? And so I think the listeners would probably want to know, like, let's try and let's explain what this means when they hold it themselves, right? So you have what is a private key and what is a public key, and how does that have anything to do with Bitcoin and storing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a private key is just a very, very large random number. A public key is just a very, very large number which is derived from that first private number. That's more or less what it is, in the kind of simplest way that I can think of it. You just need, with this private number, you can just prove that. Well, with this private number, you're just let me think how to simply explain it. Well, with this private number, it's basically a secret which you can use to prove that you know something, that you own something, basically, that you own this Bitcoin. So this private number, you can use it to prove that you own some Bitcoin. It's basically Bitcoin is basically a bearer instrument with this private number.
What's a bearer instrument?
Okay, so a bearer instrument is just how to explain it in English. Well, a bearer instrument is just it's cash basically. It's
Or like
something that you can.
gold is a bearer instrument.
Yes, yeah.
It's not a IOU. It's not something.
It's not an IOU. Yeah, exactly.
It's something that you
it's
hold,
not
and if
credit.
you hold it, you're the owner.
Yes,
Right. And in the
It's
case
not
of
credit.
Bitcoin, it's not Bitcoin that you hold the private key, right? And the private key is this offline secret that you can generate completely offline, that you don't have to be connected to the Bitcoin network to generate. And it gives you access to spend the Bitcoin, which is located on this global distributed ledger, right?
Yeah.
So we're actually not storing, when we take control of our Bitcoin, we're not storing Bitcoin, right? We're storing this secret so that no one else has the secret. Because if they get the secret, then they can spend our Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, we are just locking this Bitcoin with some random password, kind of, and we can unlock it with this password. But yeah, private key is kind of a very, very long and random password.
Right. And then okay. So I think that's relatively, I'm trying to go high level here. I'm trying to go high level to kind of explain what the goal is here, right? So we have that, and then so one way of doing that, and so that when the user is interacting with Bitcoin, they probably won't see that actual process happening, right?
Yeah.
In Bitcoin, it's usually the private key is derived from these words, the seed phrase, right? And the seed phrase is how you basically are keeping that secret safe. It's this word phrase, a set of backup words that you can go out and keep safe, right? So the question is, how do we keep that secret safe? And how do we interact with that secret when we want to actually spend our Bitcoin, right? Like that is the ultimate, at the end of the day, if we're talking high level, that's kind of what a Bitcoiner is seeking to do, right?
Yeah. So high level, most Bitcoiners don't need to understand how a private key looks like, or the specifics of the cryptography, or anything like that. They need to understand that they have these 12, 24 words which they need to keep secret, which basically can be used as their password for their Bitcoin. These 24 words can give anyone who holds the Bitcoin. If someone gets a hold of them, they hold your Bitcoin. They own your Bitcoin. It's not yours anymore. So you have to be extra cautious with these words. You shouldn't enter them on some random website. You shouldn't put them on an online computer generally. This is why we have this with these hardware wallets, or why we recommend using an air-gapped computer, or whatever you prefer usually. But yeah, you should just be very, very careful with those. It's the basically, if somebody tries to ask you about that, if a website asks you to enter that, especially now with all these phishing attacks, with this ledger hack and all this stuff, people should be very, very careful. They need to understand that these 24 words are their Bitcoin. And if they lose them, if somebody gets access to them, they get access to their Bitcoin.
Right. So the number one rule is to try, you want to keep that secret safe, right? And the single biggest thing you can do to keep that secret safe is to keep it offline. Because if you have it offline, then at least someone can't hack you through the internet and take your secret. They have to actually come into the physical wherever it's stored and take it from you. So now we have the secret. We're trying to keep the secret safe, but we need to interact with it. We need to be able to send and receive. And this is where your software comes in, the software you've been working on, Spectre Wallet. So the idea is with Spectre, just a high level brief intro to Spectre, is the idea is you run Bitcoin Core, which is your Bitcoin node, and you need a Bitcoin node to interact with the Bitcoin network. If you don't use your own node, then you're trusting someone else's node. And that has two implications. You're trusting them to actually verify that it's real Bitcoin and it's Bitcoin that complies with the consensus rules of the distributed network. And the second fold is you're trusting that node with your privacy. So its best use is to use your own node. So what Spectre does is it acts as an interface between the core node. You run Bitcoin Core and then you run Spectre. And then that interface allows you to basically construct transactions, view your balances, receive, without actually having the secret on the computer, right? It's an interface to the secret that is being stored off of the computer, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just a way to interact with Bitcoin Core with air-gapped signers or offline signers, basically. So if you have these 12 words on this on one of these hardware wallets, for example, then how you interact, actually, how do you use it to sign in transactions, to view your address and view your balances, everything like that. You need a software to use that, actually. So Spectre is this piece between the Bitcoin network and your signer device.
So let's talk a little bit about, what your goals are with Spectre, what your goals have been, and what your goals are going forward. Like, how does Spectre differentiate itself from other wallets that are on the market, and how does it help Bitcoiners use Bitcoin in this more self-sovereign way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the thing with Spectre is that we just try to use the very, very powerful code of Bitcoin Core. So Bitcoin Core is super powerful, it's super well maintained and well reviewed, but the UX is very, very hard to use if you're not an expert, if you don't know command line stuff. And that's especially bad if you want to use it with something like hardware wallets or stuff like that. So what Spectre does, it just gives you a very convenient interface to connect with your hardware wallets and your Bitcoin Core node. It doesn't require you anything like an Electrum server or stuff like that. So you just have your Bitcoin Core node and you're good to go. And I think the goal is just to make it as easy as possible for people to go from running a full node to using a full node. So there's been a lot of talk about people, how they run a full node, but nobody actually uses it. That's something I heard a lot over the years, and that's something I really want to fix with Spectre.
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to using Bitcoin and when it comes to life in general, there is a security versus convenience trade-off, and that security versus convenience trade-off. The idea is that if something's more secure, it tends to be less convenient for you. And what I love about Spectre as a user, as a Bitcoin user, as a Spectre user, is that I think it is a fantastic balance of that trade-off. Like, I think it hits the nail on the head where it's pretty easy to use, it's pretty accessible to use, but it doesn't sacrifice security too much. And I think that it provides a very nice, accessible entry-level route into using Bitcoin in a better fashion, while being able to basically upgrade the user through that process. Which is like kind of, I think, exactly what you want to look for in these self-sovereign, software libraries. Like this idea that we can provide an entry-level thing that is accessible, but then allow the user to get more advanced over time. So a key aspect of that with Spectre is that Spectre allows you to basically use your node with your hardware wallets, and these hardware wallets are basically these little purpose-built air-gapped computers. And there's a bunch of different manufacturers that make them. You can also use an actual air-gapped computer, which is just an offline computer that's not connected to the internet. And the Spectre team themselves has like a do-it-yourself air-gapped computer that acts as one of these signers as well. So the idea with Spectre is that you can use it with this plethora of signing devices that hold your secret, right? So let's explain, I guess at this point, if you're new to Bitcoin, welcome. It's going to be a fun rabbit hole. I think you're going to have a really good time. Stay humble, just keep learning, always question everyone. But now we're going to move to the more hot, deep conversation. And let's go hard on multisig. What are your current thoughts on multisig? How do you see this playing out, and what do you think current Bitcoiners should be thinking about multisig and Spectre specifically right now?
Yeah, I think personally, I think multisig is the way to go with Bitcoin in the future for any significant amount. I think there is still some learning curve, and probably there will always be. But I think it's quite good already, and I think people fear it way too much right now, way more than they should, because they are just like heard that multisig, oh, it's super hard, it's super, you could screw it up so badly, but truly you just need to give it a try. I think you don't have to even put real money there, just spin it out and see how it goes. So it's not that scary anymore, I think. You should still obviously be careful and make sure you understand what you're doing before actually starting to use it with real money. But I think it's quite easy already.
So the cool thing about Spectre is, I think when you first get started, you can use it single sig, and then you can upgrade to multisig as you go ahead. And I think one of the key things that a lot of people miss here, and we see this a lot with the phishing attacks, is one of the number one things when it comes to using Bitcoin securely or in a more secure fashion is you need to get comfortable with it. Like, you got to just use it. You got to send, you got to receive, you got to back up, you got to restore, you got to lose a little bit of coin in the process. Like, you got to get really, really comfortable with it. And instead of just like using it once, putting it away, and then looking back at it, in 10 years, like, you got to actually get comfortable with it. So before we jump into why multisig over single sig, what is the benefit of multisig over single sig?
Well, it basically, the biggest thing, in my opinion, is that it allows you to screw up without screwing up, without actually screwing up. So even if you lose one key, even if you get compromised in a way, you can still, it's not catastrophic. You can still recover the funds. There is no risk. So this is the most important thing, I think. Besides, it's more resilient against attacks. If somebody steals your hardware wallet, if your house goes on fire, anything like that, it just gives you way more resilience, basically.
So with single sig, we have one private key, or one master private key. With multi-sig, we basically have a threshold of them. So we can, a common setup is like a 3 of 5. And the idea there in the 3 of 5 is you basically need, you don't need all 5 of those keys, but you can't just spend it with one key either. So it gives you this creativity, this ability, this redundancy, that isn't possible really without Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin's the first money that gives you this capability. Like, gold doesn't have this capability. Cash does not have this capability. You could even imagine a situation where you're storing keys in different countries, in different jurisdictions, maybe in the future on different planets. And an attacker would have to go and actually compromise the acquired threshold of those keys in order to get it. In terms of heirs, you see that situation where you can have one heir hold it, hold one key, a lawyer hold one key, you hold one key. And you can have these situations where you need a group of people to basically come together to spend the funds. So it gives you a lot of flexibility, redundancy, additional security. The main negative that people talk about is complexity. And I think you guys have done a great job so far this year, and other teams in the multisig space, to make it way, way, way easier to use multisig. And I think that is very underappreciated. Like, people don't realize, just a year ago, we basically only had Electrum for user-facing multisig, and now there's like 5 or 6 different projects that are like leading the way here. And shout out to all those teams. That's fantastic. So in the complexity department, the big FUD we always hear, and I think you hear it a lot, is this idea that you need to have this summary file that basically dictates what all the keys are. Let's say you have a 3 of 5. If you lose one of those keys, you're going to need a summary file, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this an additional backup that you're going to have to download.
I just wrote about it basically in a thread on Twitter a few days ago. I even just explained all this thing, because this sounds maybe scary to some, that you need this extra thing. But in fact, this is just a file which you can save on paper, on PDF. I haven't heard like about people putting it, etching the QR code of it on a metal, on metal basically. So you can do it in various ways. You can keep it with each private key, with each mnemonic backup, more correctly. And yeah, and that's it. You don't need to worry about it that much.
And it's technically easier to back up than just a private key, because it's not a security risk. It's not a pure security risk. It's mostly a privacy risk. Someone can look up your balances and your transactions. They can't actually spend funds with it. That privacy element, if compromised, obviously adds an additional security risk, but it's not actually a funds risk. And the other thing people don't realize is if you lose a key in a single sig setup, you're fucked anyway. You're screwed anyway. So the idea here is that in multisig, if you don't lose a key, you actually probably don't even need that backup file. That backup file is still best, practice. You should use that backup. You should have it just in case. But if you don't lose a key, you probably don't even need that backup file. So it doesn't actually, I don't think it's a valid complaint of multisig. Like I think you just
not versus a single sig. So you still get the same thing with 3 of 3 multisig or 1 of 1 basically. You just don't get like the full benefit of multisig, the full potential, if you don't keep this backup. But you don't have to keep this backup if you secure your keys properly. You just need it in order to get more security out of your setup, out of your multisig setup.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, all things equal, now that we have the UX more laid out, multisig for most people does seem like the way forward, right? It's for larger amounts. I guess the main trade-off would be, and maybe it's a little bit more cumbersome. There's more things to secure, right? And I guess one of the other issues is that there's like this nuance here with like what threshold do you use? Do you have a preference on, I'm not asking what you use specifically, but what should people be thinking about when they're thinking about thresholds? Should they be thinking about 2 of 3, 3 of 5,
I think 2 of 3 or 3 of 5 is the best option. More than 5 cosigners is just basically, it's a non-standard script, so you can have up to 15 with Bitcoin, but more than 5, a lot of mining pools will just ignore the transaction. They will not mine it, so it will be kind of annoying, but again possible if you are like, but I don't think there is any reason, if you're not like a giant company holding billions or something like that, I don't know. There's no point in more than 5 cosigners anyway, I think, for most people. 2 of 3 is great because you just need 3 devices, you just need 3 locations. The important thing is that just doing multisig, and if you're just keeping everything together in the same place, you're making kind of a security theater. And there is not much benefit from using the multisig. So you really need to distribute your keys in different places in order to really make it useful and not just a security theater. So
if you distribute them poorly, like if you have them, you could actually reduce your security, right? If like I don't know, like if it's a 3 of 5 and you don't secure 3 of them well, because
if you use 2 of 3 and you keep 1 yourself and give 2 to some banks or something, then it's in some safe deposit, then again you're not really fully self-sovereign, because they can just lock you out of your access to 2 of your keys, and then you're screwed.
So we have services in the Bitcoin space now that offer co-signing services that basically offer a third party to hold one of your keys and sign your transactions for you and hold your hand. Do you have any thoughts on Bitcoiners using those services?
Yeah, ignoring privacy issue, which of course must be a problem with that. I think it's pretty great. So I think for it's generally so having one key which is not your problem kind of, and you have a company to manage that is quite useful for most people. Again, it saves you the headache of, okay, where am I going to keep it safe somewhere? So you have this company which can't really hurt you, but can help you in recovery. So I think it's generally for most users a good idea if they don't care much about the privacy implications, at least.
That's the key trade-off, right?
Yeah, it's always a trade-off with everything in securing your Bitcoin. Always a trade-off, no matter what.
And what's the privacy trade-off there for the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So the privacy trade-off is that the company knows your multisig setup, so they know how much money you own. They have one key, which is also kind of a security implication, but they can't really steal the funds with just one key, so it's not that terrible. But in terms of the privacy, they know everything about the wallet, and if they do also some KYC or anything, then they also know how much you hold and what's your identity.
I mean, I think the way to look at it, right, is I think, it's strictly better than a custodial situation, where in a custodial situation, the custodian obviously knows all your privacy. Like you have to trust them with your privacy, but they also have control of your funds. And with this, the two companies that come to mind, Unchained Capital and Casa, they basically hold your hand for you and provide this nice, easy environment where your trade-off is you're trusting them with your privacy, but they make it easier for you, and it's strictly better than a custodian, right? It could be a very nice, it could be a good stepping ground for someone who finds themselves on an exchange right now, wants to move off of an exchange, and then maybe get used to learning how to use Spectre and doing it in a self-sovereign way going forward. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's a very good option. So I think obviously doing it yourself, if you can, is way better. But for those who can't or too worried about that for any reason, I think that's a pretty good solution.
Awesome. So I mean, what are we looking forward to? 2021. What are we excited about with Bitcoin? Let's transition this conversation a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I'm really excited about Taproot. Because it means quite a bit for multisig privacy. So currently with multisig, when you're using it, everybody can know that you're using a multisig pretty much. And Taproot improves on that a lot. There is also, when you're using Schnorr and everything, which obviously will take more time than just have Taproot activated on Bitcoin, because wallet softwares will need to support it, so hardware wallets will need to support it, etc., which will take a while probably. But it's still, it all starts with having that enabled on Bitcoin. Besides that,
Taproot this year?
Sorry?
You think we're going to get Taproot this year?
I'm quite sure we will have that, but you can't really tell. I think it's getting like, it's pretty much ready, I think.
Do you think
it's really, I think we're going to have that.
do you think users should wait to experiment with multisig for Taproot, or should they start today?
No, I don't think they need to wait, because even when, as I said, even if we get Taproot this year, and even that is not sure, then until wallet softwares and hardware wallets actually support Taproot and services support Taproot, then it will take a while. And and I wouldn't recommend starting to use Taproot and the implementations from day one, because you're still using something so new with real funds. It's kind of risky, in my opinion, to because there might be bugs. It might not be as well tested with real funds. So I think waiting for that will, if you want to wait a few years, then okay. But you can't expect it like to be a matter of months wait. So I do think people should experiment with multisig already if they want to, because just waiting will be a few years, in my opinion.
Especially if someone can't read code, I think, and verify for themselves. I mean, in general, best practice is probably to take a more wait and see approach on pretty much everything in the Bitcoin space, right? Like let things get tested out, let things get pressure tested, let real funds be at risk, and see if anyone else loses their money before going whole hog into something new in Bitcoin land. Would you agree?
Yes, for sure. Let people risk their money and basically and see, and then, you know, if you're not technical, especially, then let people use it and then see how to continue.
And then the other thing is with Taproot, which I don't think, you know, I'm also very much, you know, looking forward to Taproot. I'm a Taproot bull. I think it's going to take a little bit longer than people expect. But I think one thing that people hoping for privacy improvements in the multisig front because of Taproot, like, I mean, adoption is going to be slow in the beginning. So just the act of using Taproot is going to be a heuristic. That's, you know, you're going to be one of the really enthusiast Bitcoiners that are in there in the beginning.
Yeah, that will also be kind of a problem in the beginning, which is another reason you shouldn't wait for Taproot for experimenting with multisig. Because again, it will be a few years until it's really ready, in my opinion, for real use, both because of development and, you know, privacy implications and all that. Basically, will just take a few years.
I'm just all over the place, so I apologize for that, Ben. But I'm enjoying my time with you, and we do have a captive audience here. So just to go back to like a little bit more practical and actionable advice, I tend to tell people, you know, that have never used Bitcoin in a self-sovereign way, to, you know, download a mobile wallet like Blue Wallet or Samurai Wallet and send small amount of funds to it. You know, maybe back it up, delete it, restore it from seed words. Do you agree that that's like a good, you know, nice little dip your toes in the water kind of way of dealing with it, or do you have a different process in mind?
No, I definitely agree with that. I think, well, the first step is to get Bitcoin. If you're a complete noob, then you probably start with an exchange holding it for you or something. Then you probably should start experimenting with some mobile wallet or something like that, and then really get comfortable with it, with the concept of securing your 12 words, the backup, and learn how to restore that, learn how to what is a Bitcoin address, how to handle that, how to send money, how to receive money. Then you can progress to other stuff when you really feel comfortable with that. But the number one thing with Bitcoin security, I think, is just don't screw yourself up. So you're your worst enemy. I've seen way more people lose money because they screwed themselves than I've seen people getting screwed by an attacker. So I would just be very, very careful and make sure that you're comfortable and know what you're doing. So you don't feel, if you feel like, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing, then you probably shouldn't do it. Just make sure that you feel that you feel comfortable with your setup, and then you can progress to real funds.
Yeah, I mean, I think 99% of lost Bitcoin has to do with user error, probably. I mean, I don't have that. That number's not a hard number. That's just a gut, but that's what I've noticed from my experience. And it's really easy to you want to be comfortable. I think ultimately there's no such thing as a perfect setup. Consider using multiple setups, and you just want to get comfortable. You want to get comfortable over time, and not rush into anything. It's very easy to basically technical FOMO your way into too complex of a setup, and then you find yourself in a situation where you're panicking. And in that situation, if you feel like something's going wrong, try and push back against the panic. Take a deep breath, you know, don't like make, you know, rapid moves, you know, just to take a deep breath, maybe reach out to your Bitcoiner friends. But, you know, before you do anything too drastic, because I've seen people then dig themselves farther into farther into a mess.
Yes, exactly.
So
Just
we
reach
have,
out to somebody and
yeah,
ask questions.
exactly. So we have Caitlin in the comments. She's asking, in terms of signing devices for 3 of 5 Spectre setup, do you have any recommendations or preferences there?
I guess again, it depends on your level of expertise. I think 305, because there are not so many great signing devices for 305, then it's probably more for experts. But generally, the things that I think are pretty nice to use currently, there is obviously Cold Card, which I really like. Kobo is very nice. If you want to build your own hardware wallet, then Spectre DIY is also great for that. And also, it's not yet supported in Spectre for multisig, but there's Bitbox 2, which will be supported for multisig also soon, and have very good multisig support. And besides that, if you feel comfortable with an air-gapped computer or something, then you can use Bitcoin Core on an air-gapped computer, and that's really great too. Or some Electrum or something on a mobile phone even, or something like that as an air-gapped mobile phone signer, like even a Pine phone or whatever. But in terms of hardware wallets, you can reuse, you can use 2 cold cards or whatever, but it's generally not that recommended because you're putting quite some trust in the manufacturer. So yeah, I think Cold Card, Kobo, Bitbox, Spectre DIY, or some air-gapped computer with Bitcoin Core are great options to explore and just see what works for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's some nuance there, right? Because obviously, in a single sig, you have more trust in whatever manufacturer signing device you're going with. And there's ways to reduce that trust, things like providing your own entropy, dice rolls, passphrases, other advanced user features. But one of the beauties of multisig is when you combine multiple signing devices, then you reduce the trust in any individual signing device. So if you have a duplicate in there, then obviously there's increased trust in that duplicate. But if the thresholds are 3 of 5 and you only have 2 duplicates, then it still needs to, an attacker would still need to compromise a separate device, a third device. But I do tend to agree with you that especially now, when ultimately at the end of the day, your security comes down to your signing devices, and it is additive of them combined, but they are, your last line of defense. You are kind of stretching yourself a little bit when you get to these larger threshold setups compared to something like a 2 of 3, and that will change. I think, we've seen the hardware wallet space, the signing space. Spectre DIY is pretty much brand new. Cold Card is a relatively new entry. Like, we're seeing them improve and standardize so that they can use all these different, that they can use Spectre and plug and play really easily. So I think it will get better very quickly. I think, 2021 is really, like, 2020 is the year that multisig became easy, and 2021 is the year it becomes mainstream, in Bitcoin at least. And one of the big things that I think a lot of people aren't really watching right now is the old phone as a signer. I think if you can make it pretty easy to use like an old cheap Android phone as one of the signers, then that kind of, it's just like a nice little additive bonus. It can scan QR codes and do the PSBT, and I'm kind of pumped on that idea as a concept.
Yeah, definitely. I need to recheck like which options are available for what mobile phones, but that's really a nice option too.
So, I mean, I love this conversation, Ben. I'm really glad you got to join me on this one because I'm a huge fan of your work, and I'm especially a huge fan of your ship posting. I'm getting the wrap-up signal here. So I just wanted, do you have any last words for the listeners before we go out?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you for inviting me, and just make sure I really recommend you to at least try out to hold your own keys, to use your own node. Take your time with it, play with it before you're doing anything rushed or anything. But I really recommend to explore that. You really should try to do that.
Big thanks to Bitcoin Magazine. Thank you again, Ben. And cheers to Bitcoin. 12 more years. Let's go.
Cheers. Thanks.
What is up, Bitcoiners? Welcome to the Bitcoin Magazine Proof of Keys live stream and the happy birthday to Bitcoin. Happy 12th birthday to Bitcoin. I'm super excited to have Alex Gladstein here to do this AMA. He is someone who's really been pushing Bitcoin privacy, sovereignty, Bitcoin adoption on a very real and usable level. Alex, welcome to the stream.
Happy to be here. It's an exciting day for Bitcoin and for freedom around the world, and a bad day for dictators everywhere.
So, I mean, Alex, I guess before we get into the listener questions, want to just, get your take on 2020. Like, what a crazy, absolutely crazy year for Bitcoin, absolutely crazy year for the planet. Just kind of like looking back, if there was like a overarching lesson or takeaway that you can take from 2020, what would that be?
It would be that authoritarians around the world are going to use any opportunity to expand their power and crack down on civil liberties and, cement their control over society. So out of China a year ago popped up a new opportunity for them. And of course, for citizens, it's been a harrowing year filled with economic shutdown, filled with disease, filled with death. But for them, it was an opportunity to expand their power and control. And, it sounds maybe a little tinfoil hat, for people in, let's say, Canada or the United States, perhaps, but not so in other countries. And, in dictatorships, the government absolutely used this opportunity to level up their control apparatus. I mean, just as an example, in China, during the March and April period, people for the first time had to show a particular color on their phone to leave their apartment building in certain cities, or else they weren't allowed to leave. And that color was not biometric. That color was determined by someone, and that color was, essentially green, yellow, or red. And if you didn't show green, you couldn't go to work, you couldn't leave. And these temporary measures have become permanent. There's the old Soviet joke, right? That there's nothing more permanent than a temporary measure. And these things have just sort of been ingrained into society. And on a maybe less shocking level, you're even seeing that in the West. I mean, we have these sort of like COVID tracking protocols that are being built into our phones. And most people aren't very aware of what's happening, but it's just sort of the gradual normalization of surveillance, I would say, historically is going to be the big civil liberties takeaway from 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's true in developing in non-Western countries, but it's absolutely true in Westernized countries too. And you pointed to some of the temporary measures that become permanent. There's a lot of temporary measures in place right now, and we see people really kind of getting up in arms about like how and when they're going to be taken down across the world. So really quickly in the chat, someone said, "Who's Alex?" So I just realized we didn't really do a proper introduction. In the stream, you can see he's the CSO at the Human Rights Foundation. Do you kind of want to talk a little bit about what you do day to day and maybe relate it to Bitcoin too?
Sure. So since before Bitcoin, I've been working at the Human Rights Foundation, which is a nonprofit based in New York City that focuses on helping people who live under authoritarian regimes around the world. And to us, tyranny is pretty much the biggest problem for humanity. There's about 4.2 billion people out of the 7.5 today that live under some sort of tyrannical regime, whether it be a military dictatorship, a monarch, an absolute monarch, a junta. We see this everywhere from Xi Jinping in China to Putin in Russia to the Maduro regime in Venezuela, and on and on and on. I mean, most countries, unfortunately, in Africa, the Middle East, are dictatorships. There's about 95 of them around the world, and in every case, the centralization of political power is bad for humans. And it's not just a civil liberties issue. If you actually look at stuff like refugees, where do refugees come from? 95% of them come from dictatorships. People don't flee Norway, let's put it that way. Scientific innovation, look at patent rates. most of the world's creativity, patents, innovations come from open societies, come from democracies. So, you look at anything really, maternal health rates, growth rates, I mean, any sort of socioeconomic data, long-term is worse in dictatorships. And this is best exemplified by looking at a satellite image of the Korean Peninsula at night, where you can really strikingly see the difference between, a society that has more freedoms versus a society that has very few freedoms. And it's black and white, right? So we've recognized authoritarianism as basically the biggest challenge facing humanity. I mean, there's more people that live under authoritarianism than, suffer from war and conflict, that suffer from natural disasters, that are in absolute poverty. Just to give some numbers there, I mean, there's about 800, 900 million people that lack access to clean drinking water. Sorry, 800 to 900 million people who lack access to clean drinking water, or who lack access to, for example, a job where they can get more than $1 or $2 per day. Yet there's like 4.2 billion who live under some sort of tyrannical regime. So we think it's the biggest problem facing humanity. And I've been working at HRF ever since 2007 on different programs to help people who live under these regimes. And throughout my time there, technology as a tool of empowerment has been a constant thread, whether it be our programs to smuggle flash drives with outside information on them into places like Cuba and North Korea, or obviously in the last few years, more recently, unpacking what Bitcoin means for financial freedom, and both kind of advancing and studying how it's making a difference in these societies around the world.
Awesome. That was a very, very comprehensive answer. And I like to point out that you are at HRF pre-Bitcoin, 2007. So pre-Bitcoin, yes. And then HRF kind of seeing Bitcoin come into play and evolve, and then eventually adopting it and start signaling for Bitcoin. Can you kind of talk about how did HRF kind of vet Bitcoin, see Bitcoin, and then ultimately decide to kind of advocate for it?
Yeah, I mean, we were first sort of introduced to Bitcoin in 2013 by some folks who approached us and said they wanted to send money to support activists in Ukraine. And this was obviously late 2013. This was right before the Russians invaded, right? So it was a tough time for Ukrainian civil society, and their bank accounts were being shut down. And folks came to us and said, well, what about this? And we were like, that's interesting. But of course, like most at the time, we didn't really get it. I mean, we looked at it and we thought it was interesting, but we didn't really decide to pursue it at that time. And, let's face it, most people didn't, because it just wasn't something that a lot of people took very seriously at that time. But you know what? Bitcoin has its way. And the next year, in 2014, one of our donors was like, hey, can I donate and make a difference for you guys in Bitcoin? And we were like, sure, let's do it. So we set up an early Coinbase account and we started taking Bitcoin donations. And that was, something that we benefited greatly from for many years. And then in 2017, in the spring of 2017, May 2017, ironically, when Bitcoin was making its big rise from like $1,000 to $2,000, that's when we did our first workshop connecting activists to Bitcoin folks. And we've just been trying to increase our programming in that area ever since. And in the past year, we've started funding Bitcoin core development, as well as other free and open source Bitcoin projects through the Bitcoin Development Fund at HRF.
Yeah, you guys entering into the Bitcoin development fundraising space is extremely bullish for 2020 and for Bitcoin. One of our questions is asking, he saw a post from Ray Dillinger kind of criticizing Bitcoin's privacy and saying it's broken.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure if you saw that post. I did not. But he's saying
that
as a privacy advocate and as someone who's kind of pushing for privacy tech development, where do you see the state of Bitcoin privacy? Where can it be improved? Are you hopeful? Kind of what's your overall?
Yeah, I'm very hopeful. I think we need to be realistic, and obviously, privacy was not the number one thing that Satoshi and everyone else who's worked on Bitcoin ever since prioritized as the number one thing, because that wouldn't have been a good way to approach eCash. Instead, they focused on making something that was a good store of value, something that was scarce, something that had a decentralized issuance. Those things we have seen over time are the better substrate for eCash, for digital cash. Now, once you have those things with a programmable substrate, now things start to get interesting. So, from the beginning, there have been many different brilliant people in Bitcoin figuring out ways to make Bitcoin use more private. Those are accelerating. And if you just look at the upgrades, and I mean, it's hard to not to be optimistic if you just look at the last couple of years. If you look at the upgrades to the base protocol, I mean, upgrades that made things like the Lightning Network possible. We have Taproot coming. So, it does seem a little slow, but it's very important for people to understand that digital cash isn't going to help anybody if it's not worth anything. And making it valuable is the most important thing, keeping it valuable. And then over time, we're going to add privacy, and it's going to really become, I think, a very formidable privacy tool in the near future. I mean, it already is in many ways. I think a lot of these critics who are very technical people don't understand what's happening out there in the real world. So there's like a disconnect between technical analysis of Bitcoin privacy in some cases and real world usage. So I'll just give an example. So in Nigeria, a couple months ago, folks were raising funds for protests against police brutality with Bitcoin. I mean, their bank accounts were being turned on, turned off. So, and they were doing it with one address, right? Which obviously, as most folks would know here, is not super safe, because obviously anyone watching can start to understand where that money's going and start to pair the donors and start to see where the funds are flowing. And the government could do that, and that'd be bad. So we encourage them to set up a BTC Pay server instead. So, this is not like some radical privacy breakthrough, but what it does is it's a major improvement in this area, because all of a sudden the people donating are donating to fresh addresses every time that no one else knows. I mean, it's auto generated, and only that person can see it. And then the next person who donates to a new address. So these things seem maybe minor on, perhaps to the technical community, but in practice, they're very important, because all of a sudden it makes, an adversary trying to understand what's going on, it really flusters them. So even basic stuff like BTC Pay server goes a long way, even though you might not think of it as a privacy technology.
I love that example. And I know that there's a lot of Bitcoin critics, even people in the altcoin space, who, will push back on Bitcoin privacy. But the reality is that you can use Bitcoin privately. And now it's just about making that best use case of Bitcoin accessible and liquid, and, something that people can actually access and deal with on their own. I guess, what excites you about the Bitcoin privacy landscape right now, and where do you see kind of like people building the right tools?
Well, obviously the big bad guy is chain surveillance. So the huge vulnerability of Bitcoin, of course, is in many ways what also makes it powerful is the open ledger, right? Which gives us auditability, which is again chief and primary. Can't be compromised. But at the same time, people have developed the Lightning Network, which is pretty breathtaking from just a simple point of view in terms of it just removes your transactions from the blockchain. So like that chain analysis is not very helpful if you and I are transacting in a way that they can't see. And I know it's nation. I know it's slow going, at least in the eyes of critics. But I mean, Lightning continues to develop, and I really do believe, and this took me a while to understand and to build this understanding, but I really do believe that Bitcoin itself is going to be this very auditable, very hyper secure settlement layer. And then, that is what gives the whole system value. And then on top of that, there's going to be layered technologies, and there are going to be these private instant cash layers on top, right? Which do make some trade-offs. And that's just the way the system's going to work. And Lightning is sort of one of the first iterations of that. We'll see how it goes. I'm very bullish about it. But you know what? The great thing is these second layers can experiment. I mean, they can fail. Doesn't impact the value proposition of the underlying layer.
Yep, absolutely.
Doesn't touch it at all. So I'm quite bullish on more and more Lightning usage and adoption, and people transacting and doing micropayments and paying each other, and all this stuff is just much harder to surveil. I mean, nothing's perfect. There's still ways to sort of like game the system and try to figure out what's going on in Lightning, but it's obviously a hell of a lot harder than just looking at transactions on the base layer. But again, even that, I mean, we're looking at this upgrade, which is now being endorsed by 91% of all the miners in the world, Taproot, which basically makes different kinds of transactions on the blockchain look the same. So all of a sudden, you're introducing a huge amount of plausible deniability and confusion to chain analysis folks. You've already got user-level, user-friendly coin joins happening from a bunch of different organizations. These continue to get stronger. And then in the next couple of years, you might even see upgrades like cross input signature aggregation, things like that, which may make privacy tech the economically wise thing to do. I mean, so I think the future is very bright in this area from a technological perspective. And I would just caution people who are upset with Bitcoin's, what they see as like a lack of innovation or an ossification, which has forced them to go off and try to create their own projects. I mean, the value proposition here, I mean, we're talking about money that people will use for hopefully hundreds and hundreds of years. So the fact that you're upset that it's not moving fast enough is not justification for you to go off and create your own project. I mean, try to be open-minded here about the fact that this is a very long-term project, and we need to be very careful about the underlying value proposition.
Yeah, well, I would push back a little bit and say that the fact that people can go off and do their own thing is a positive thing for the fact that Bitcoin can stay what it is and keep iterating its way, and people can experiment elsewhere, and then hopefully something exciting happens.
And I guess this isn't to say that all these privacy coins aren't helpful in some way. They are experimenting with unstable tech that has flaws, and we're getting to see that stuff play out live. And there's a lot of different ways to bring privacy to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin engineers are watching this stuff, and they're going to bring, they're going to make proposals to Bitcoin that make the most sense. So in a lot of ways, all these other coins are like test nets in some ways for understanding what may work and what may not work. And, you're always going to have this battle between auditability and privacy. But again, I think they're a combination of base layer upgrades that make transactions essentially indistinguishable over time, and that encourage people to aggregate their transactions with one another over time. This is really going to fluster chain surveillance. And if more and more people can be transacting through networks like Lightning, or even like state chains or different kinds of side chains, I mean, I think there's just so much to be hopeful for in this area.
Yeah, so I want to zoom it out and talk about users and people. I think there's a lot of people in the West who might not appreciate how useful Bitcoin is just as it is today, for people who might not have the assurances and the infrastructure that people in the West have. Can you just talk a little bit about like what Bitcoin is doing for people today and how Bitcoin helps its users today?
Yeah, and here's again, like I support and I encourage all this hardcore privacy research and hand wringing. It's essential. I mean, we all have to be better. But at the same time, we should realize that like the majority of people using Bitcoin are not up against NSA level adversaries who are trying to like micro inspect what they are doing. Most people who are using Bitcoin are in a sense of using it for like remittances, things like that. They're not up against the NSA. So there's a balance between like our need to be cautious and also an understanding that like the world is not just Americans fighting the American government or whatever. It's much more broad than that. And a lot of these other governments are busy, trying just to stay alive. They don't have the time to hire a chain analysis company and go after people. Some of them do, but some of them don't. And just to give an example of how powerful this protocol is right now, what it enables, There are some friends of mine in Nigeria that have created this app called Send Cash. And this to me is just fascinating. And I think right now in Bitcoin's like life cycle, the bridges between fiat and Bitcoin are very, very important, obviously. I mean, maybe like 100 years from now, they won't matter, but like today, they're really, really important. It is what gives Bitcoin its value, is in many ways your ability to turn it into fiat, or to find someone who will buy it from you. I mean, this is really in many ways what has increased adoption, and this increased liquidity and awareness is really like what's like giving Bitcoin a lot more credibility right now. And with this app, anyone with a Bitcoin wallet can send Bitcoin through this phone app, and it can settle in Naira, which is the currency in Nigeria. It can settle in Naira in minutes into like any Nigerian's bank account. So you're using, Bitcoin to bypass like all this nonsense of like, Western Union and like taking days to send money across borders and extortionate fees and all this stuff. And some scrappy startup, which is now growing into a really impressive company in Nigeria, has figured out a way for them to use Bitcoin as this payment rail for you to make essentially like instant international deposits of up to a certain amount. I think it's like $2,000 a day or something like that.
Plenty.
That to me is just shocking. And this is a huge country, Nigeria. This is like where a lot of Bitcoin innovation is happening. There are going to be more Nigerians than Americans by 2050. I mean, this is the largest country in Africa. So, I mean, this is like some really exciting stuff. And I think it's a good example of how people have figured out how to use this thing to circumvent the wildly extortionate international remittance scheme. I mean, you're talking about a situation where there's like tens and tens and tens of millions of people around the world who work abroad, send money back home to their family. The average remittance is about $200, and they're paying anywhere from 5 to 15% on that. And it takes time. It can be frozen. We're just talking about throwing that entirely out the window and just being able to do it in less than an hour with this new technology. And that to me is just incredibly powerful, and it's changing the lives of so many people. And it's something that all these Bitcoin critics in the West are totally blind to. I mean, they just don't understand this is happening. They refuse to accept it. They won't even answer me when I ask them about it. So, I mean, you get a lot of these people saying, "Oh, poor people can't buy Bitcoin." I mean, this is nonsense. I mean, people who literally can't afford remittances are turning to Bitcoin to save money and feed their families. This is like happening at a huge scale, and there's just mass denial about it, which I guess we should expect, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is kind of funny that people say poor people can't get a hold of Bitcoin, but the reality is that poor people can't get a hold of dollars. They are systematically either priced out or edged out of the dollar system because of credentialing or not having an address.
Yeah.
Like they can't get dollars. If they could get dollars, they would. They have to use Bitcoin.
Yeah, and this is an area where like privacy is like the last thing that these people are thinking about right now. I mean, we need to build it because eventually they will need it. But like right now, I mean, they're talking about using Bitcoin as a payment rail and peer-to-peer marketplaces. Their governments have no idea what's going on, and they're just using this as like a better way to move money from point A to point B. And this is kind of like a really like blossoming use case that like we're watching people do over time. And obviously, as the price goes up, it becomes more effective, it becomes more efficient, it becomes even better than using dollars in many ways.
Yep. It's two parallel systems, and then the Bitcoin system is just gaining, right, and becoming more useful. This is proof of keys day, so I want to take it back to kind of storing Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin, using Bitcoin in a self-sovereign way. I'm kind of curious, like when HRF talks to users, maybe users who are a little disadvantaged from a financial perspective, like how are you guys recommending for people to get onboarded onto Bitcoin in a way that is at least minimally viable, protective of them and their sovereignty?
Yeah, I mean, look, this day is very important because the revolution of Bitcoin in many ways is to be your own bank, right? And the activists that we work with around the world are constantly facing financial repression, censorship, seizure. I'll give one example. This incredible woman that we know is a democracy activist in Nicaragua, which is being torn apart by the Ortega regime. Like this zombie guy who never dies. He's been around since the 80s, forcing his, corrupt socialism on the nation and ruining Nicaragua. It's terrible. But anyway, this woman, she was in government in the opposition, and now she's left and she's a democracy activist. But basically, the government, they just like froze her bank account because they didn't like her. So she has to go to Costa Rica to do her banking. So like if and again, she's not in government anymore, she's in civil society. So if like you wanted to make a donation to her organization, or if she was trying to earn some income to do her work, the government, let's say Bitcoin doesn't exist, the government has figured out a way to totally neutralize her. They just shut down her access to the banking system. So basically she has to go to some other country and then use paper money to move back and forth. I mean, it's very dinosaur and unfortunately very possible for governments to do. So when we were talking to her about a year ago, she was part of a fellowship that we run called the Freedom Fellowship. And we have now incorporated sort of some basic Bitcoin education into this. And we're like explaining this to her that like we can send her any amount of value to her directly, in Nicaragua. She can custody that herself relatively easily. And then she can sell it into fiat whenever she needs to in the peer-to-peer marketplaces without having to go to Costa Rica. I mean, this is like a total game changer for her, complete game changer. So I think that's why proof of keys is so important, is that it just allows them to take control. I mean, there are other folks that we work with where, I'll give another example. There's another person from another authoritarian country, which I won't name, that as part of this program, they had to they paid their own way to go to some other country to get a visa because the line was like super long at the consulate in their country. They're trying to get a visa to come to America. So they spent like $1,000 out of pocket, and we needed to reimburse them, right? So normally what would happen is this person would come to the program in America and we would spend a week together, whatever, and then we would just give them $1,000 in cash, and then they would just like literally secretly try to transport that back to their own home country, like in their clothing, essentially, things like that. And it's terrifying. So we can just completely eradicate that fear and that anxiety. And we can, after the program's done, we'll just, teach this person how to receive Bitcoin on their phone, how to custody it, out of the government has no idea what's going on. And, that person can then use peer-to-peer marketplaces to sell this off into fiat as they need to pay program expenses or whatever. And that last piece is so key, right? So maybe that didn't exist in 2013, 2012. Like maybe it wasn't so easy to sell your Bitcoin for rubles in Moscow then, but it is today, right? So a lot of these critics that are trotting out arguments from 7-8 years ago, they're just wrong now. I mean, there's just this incredible liquidity. There are people very, very happy. There are people very, very, very happy to buy your Bitcoin from you in like pretty much any major capital on earth today.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have, this is anecdotal, I don't have any hardline facts, but I would venture to say that Bitcoin is the most liquid, instrument in the world today. Like against the long tail of currencies, it's probably the most liquid. Maybe dollars is still more against the long tail, but Bitcoin's catching up really quickly, and it's extremely exciting to see. One of the listeners.
It's top 5 for sure, right? Because maybe you could find dollars or euros in a lot of these countries, but like you're not going to find like Saudi rials, right? Or like Argentine peso. You're not going to find smaller currencies halfway around the world. So it is this like bridge between monies. It's this sort of great monetary equalizer that's doing a lot of good.
Yeah, and it's permissionless, right? And that's what gives it its edge,
Yeah,
even though it might not be as liquid or as well known right now.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the listeners asking, as a pleb, potentially someone from a Western country, what can they do to help? How can they be a part of, uplifting human rights, maybe from a Bitcoin angle?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot that anyone can do that we don't even have to get into donating to these organizations or whatever. I mean, Bitcoin education is really key. There's still a lot of room for improvement in translation of, pick your favorite Bitcoin texts, whichever ones moved you. If you're a Bitcoin pleb today, if that's how you refer to yourself. Someone obviously convinced you had the penny drop, and it may have been a Medium post or an article or a podcast. If you're able to somehow get that into a different language and get that out there, more power to you. That's like incredibly important. I would say also supporting or getting involved with free and open source tools that allow people to use and interact with Bitcoin in a more sovereign way, in an easy way, is a really great thing. So something like Spectre, for example, which makes things that might be kind of second level for new Bitcoiners, like multi-signature security and self-custody. I mean, like making it kind of, when you open this app, it's like fun, it's easy to use, it has a great user interface. These are things we need right now, right? So like, improving, UX around self-custody, privacy. I mean, if you can somehow contribute in some way to this, maybe you can give these developers a little bit of Bitcoin here and there as they work on their noble tasks. That's great. If you work in media and you can interview them and get their story out. I think a lot of people listening, maybe Bitcoin's their like hobby or their pastime, but their real job is like they work for some big company or they work in some other industry. If that industry is anything related to finance, you could always try to bring one of these developers in for a chat at your company and do, a fireside on what is it like to be a Bitcoin engineer? Like, tell us, like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Getting a bigger spotlight on developers, not just core developers, but also the people who are building these tools that allow us to interact more easily with Bitcoin. I think all these things are easy low-hanging fruit for anybody, and not all of them require donations. I mean, there's a lot you can just do with your own networks and time.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you can donate to HRF if you're in the West. It's tax advantaged. And there are many other organizations coming out. I know that Brink, which you guys are affiliated with, they are also working on providing a tax advantage way to donate to Bitcoin development. So Bitcoiners are always innovating on every level. It really impresses me. And I guess, do you want to talk a little bit about the HRF's like efforts within Bitcoin privacy and promoting kind of like dissident tech development specifically?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when we came out with the Bitcoin Development Fund, our first gift was to Chris Belcher for his work on CoinSwap, which is a tricky but very promising privacy upgrade that doesn't require any sort of Bitcoin doesn't require a new upgrade in Bitcoin software itself. I mean, it can be done right now. And, his goal is to get that up and running and, into wallets, in the next year. And he had some major testnet news and announcements a couple of weeks ago. So you all should be following what Chris is doing. But, at the end of the day, we want to do our part to help ensure that Bitcoin remains a tool of financial freedom. And for that to be the case, it needs to be relatively private. It needs to have, I think we need to be aiming for pretty good privacy here. I mean, there's not going to be anonymity, then there's no auditability of the system. But we need to be able to have pretty good privacy and make ourselves not the lowest hanging fruit. And I think there's some awesome work being done by Matt Odell and others in his community, 6102 on Twitter. I mean, these folks are making guides for you to figure out how to use Bitcoin more privately. And you know what? Like, I think one of the big things is like this idea of like the bigotry of low expectations is actually a phrase from like the Bush administration. But it was this idea that like there's a lot of people out there who said that like Arabs or Chinese or Russians like couldn't have democracy or whatever, which is obviously nonsense. If you look at like Taiwan or South Korea or Tunisia or whatever, it was basically like thinly veiled racism, right? So there's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, like a lot of these Bitcoin critics who live in the West who are living in these comfy apartments in New Jersey or whatever, like Krugman or whatever. I mean, they're like enjoying the trappings of our society, and they're like, well, people could never figure this out they'll make the mistake of calling Africa a country or something stupid like that. I mean, they're so disconnected. So what they don't understand is that like the Bitcoin users I've met who are from like Sudan, Syria, they take this shit super seriously. They're brilliant and they will figure it out. But do not assume less of your fellow man or woman depending on where they're from. They are equally as brilliant as you and they will figure this shit out. So let's not have this like bigotry of low expectations that like it's too hard to use Bitcoin. If Matt Odell and 6102 could figure it out, so could these other people. So just give them the educational materials, and they'll start to use Bitcoin again as a savings mechanism first. This is how people are doing it. They're figuring it out. They're realizing that they can escape their collapsing currency by opting into Bitcoin. Maybe they start sending it to family. Then eventually they're gonna get into a situation where they realize they want it to be more private. And then they're gonna seek to do that and implement that. They're gonna want to learn more about it and read more about it. And this is happening, but it's a process. I mean, people aren't getting into Bitcoin and immediately trying to figure out how to achieve pretty good privacy. This is not. That's just an ignorant way of looking at it. Like they first come into Bitcoin because of NGU technology, and then later they figure out this other stuff. So we need to do our best to get the educational materials out there, be a resource. And I know folks like 6102 are always out there saying they're willing to help anybody set up a node and use Bitcoin more privately. But let's dispense with the bigotry of low expectations here. There are plenty of Matt Odells in many other countries who are even smarter than Matt. Sorry, Matt, but even smarter than him. They're going to figure this shit out when they need to on their own terms. And the more we can spread this educational stuff, the better. But they're going to use it and they're going to protect themselves at the end of the day. And I've talked to countless people from many different countries who figured out self-sovereignty and pretty good privacy. And there will be many, many more like them.
All right. Well, I mean, kind of on that note, do you have any really inspiring stories from 2020 or that are top of mind? Not to put you on the spot.
I talked about it on Peter McCormick's pod, but it's worth dwelling on this one example, which is just shocking to me. Not shocking is the wrong word, but like really awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
From
It's
Belarus,
incredible.
This basically group of people in Belarus, young people, grassroots movement of hundreds of thousands of young Belarusians, many of whom live abroad. So Belarus is a low economic growth, very repressive, sort of Soviet-style dictatorship. So if you're like a young person there, you want to get the hell out. So many of them have. So like young entrepreneurial Belarusians have moved, and now they're living in Estonia, or they're living in Mountain View, starting companies in Silicon Valley or whatever. So there's like this huge, very brilliant, wealthy, empowered Belarusian diaspora, right? And they have been watching what's been happening to their country over the last decade. And this summer, they saw an opportunity and said, you know what, enough is enough. And they've had this dictator oppressing the people there for literally decades, since the Soviet times. And they want him gone. So while their brothers and sisters are like marching on the streets peacefully every day, it continues. I mean, hundreds of days after it started in August, and people, even though it's freezing out there, they continue to piss off the police and fluster the dictator, and they're not stopping. So these protests in Belarus continue to go. But this grassroots movement outside had money, and they said, we want to help, right? So what immediately they would do normally is like you would like wire a large amount of money from a European bank account to a Belarusian account controlled by your colleagues or whatever, and then they would like spend it on gas masks or organizing protests or whatever. Those transactions started to get frozen. They're kind of obvious. Like the government in Belarus knows, who owns what account, and they're watching for like large incoming wires, right? So a lot of those funds got frozen. So what one group called BYSOL, BYSOL, started to do, once they had raised literally like hundreds of thousands of dollars, some of which through HRF, we've helped them. I think we've given them close to $100,000 so far. What they've started to do is use Bitcoin. And it's interesting talking to these folks. They were not like, these are not Bitcoiners by heart. It's not like they were fans of Bitcoin. They were very skeptical of Bitcoin, let's put it that way. But as they say, once they saw that it worked, they became very excited about it. So what they've essentially been doing is getting around this like bank account freezing that the Belarusian government is doing by sending small amounts peer-to-peer directly to Belarusians. So what they do is right now in Belarus, what's really important is to strike against the regime. It's not an oil state. They get most of their income from industrial revenue. So people at these big plants are striking. And it's like putting a lot of pressure on the government in a peaceful way. It's like a really important thing to do. However, they still need to like feed their family while they're striking, and they're not getting their wages, right? So when you quit your job and strike. So what they do is they use Telegram to prove their identity to BYSOL, and they send in a bunch of photos, documentation, whatever. And then Bicel gives them like a one-time 1,500 euro grant so that they can continue to strike and keep the pressure on, keep the heat on, right? And again, that's not done through the banking system. They send Bitcoin directly to them on a peer-to-peer wallet. They use primarily it's called a trustee wallet. It's built by some Ukrainians. And it's a free, I believe it's a free open source wallet that they download. And then what happens is, it's very interesting. So 1,500 euros of Bitcoin goes onto their phone, and Bicel explains to these people how to do this. And again, bigotry of low expectations. Not a single person that they've sent money to has been confused about how to do this. They all figured it out, right? And then again, with the privacy thing, it's not entirely private. Like, yes, there's no KYC to use the app initially, but what they do is they put in their bank account number and routing number into the app. And behind the scenes, what they do is once they receive the euros, they sell, not everybody sells it, but some of them sell it into rubles because they need to go to the supermarket and buy food, right? So what they do is the Bitcoin arrives on the app on their phone, custody themselves. They have their own self-custody. And then what they do is maybe they sell a third of it off into rubles. And, within less than an hour, the rubles are in their bank account. What's happening on the back end that they're not seeing is that some Russian or Ukrainian is buying their Bitcoin from them and then wiring the rubles to their bank account. So again, it's not perfectly private at all, but the government has no idea what's going on. I mean, what the government sees on their side is like lots of small transactions happening all across the nation. And anything smaller than a couple thousand euros, this is a very common, it could be a rent payment, who knows what. So they're watching like wires from the broader, economic region happening. They're not seeing anything big. And they're not doing timing analysis on the Bitcoin blockchain. They have no clue what's happening. So it's basically unstoppable aid to the striking workers. And it really, if the regime wanted to stop this, they'd have to shut down the whole banking system, which they can't do. So this has been really interesting for me to watch. And I just think you're going to see a lot more people start to realize this and implement it. But to see it happen on a national scale to the tune of almost $1 million so far that they've actually sent in via Bitcoin. And obviously it's crazy because think about how many people's lives have been changed. They were starting to do this when Bitcoin was selling for 10,000 US dollars, 12,000 US dollars. Yeah. I mean, now it's 33, 32, 34. I mean, you're talking about lives changing here just in the last few months. So, I mean, what's been happening there is worth reading about. We did a pod with Peter about it if you want to go more in depth. But again, here are people who were skeptical of Bitcoin and have figured out that, wow, this is something that like can really be useful in our struggle. And that's been very, very like an inspiring story for sure.
Yeah, no, that's extremely inspiring. And I mean, one thing just specifically, it just shows how incredible Bitcoin is as a peer-to-peer instrument, right? Like it is, if you're using Bitcoin peer-to-peer and you're transferring it from person to person, it is just a very, very powerful and incredible piece of technology. And I think that's where the value is. And some people, they just don't see past like the brokerage exchange interface.
No, and we could see where this is going. Like in 5 years, would you really, I mean, in 5 years, you could have these like non-KYC open source Lightning wallets, essentially. I mean, think about what's possible. I mean, it just blows the mind. If you think about what I just described, this is still under the constraints, if you want to call it that, of using the base layer of Bitcoin protocol, which again is still relatively slow, has relatively high fees, all these things. Even though today the fees are quite cheap and it still settles pretty quickly. But we're talking about being able to do it with much smaller fees instantly and much more privately. So that's why the Lightning Network is I think really important from a moral point of view. Whether or not it works from an economic and technical point of view is certainly still up for debate on a mass scale. But morally speaking, it would be incredible because it would like supercharge what I just described. Yep. And it's just very, very exciting. So certainly supporting people working on Lightning stuff is I think a very good thing to be doing right now from a human rights perspective.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, we're out of time. Alex, why don't you give your last words to the audience and final shout out for Bitcoin's birthday?
Keep your eyes out on what we're doing at Ahrefs. We're going to announce some new news in the coming couple weeks. A couple new projects that we're supporting out of the Dev Fund. We have some cool educational content coming out that we're working on with Reason Magazine. That's going to come out in the next couple weeks. A couple exciting things. Thanks for having me on. Happy birthday, Bitcoin. Be your own bank. Remember, that's the revolution. So withdraw all that stuff into your own custody, and start doing that on a regular basis, and you'll reap the rewards later. But anyway, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the time. Happy holidays, and we'll see you again probably very shortly on another Bitcoin Magazine production. And for all the viewers out there, stick around. We have some more fantastic programming. Up next is Matt Odell with Ketan and Wiz, and then we have upping your Bitcoin privacy and sovereignty in 15 minutes, and then we're going to be giving away Bitcoin on marbles. So stick around for all of that. Thanks again, Alex, and on to the commercial break.
See you later.
What's up, Bitcoiners? It's your boy, Matt Odell. I'm excited to be here on the eve of Bitcoin's 12th birthday, 12th anniversary of the Genesis block, with my good friends Ketan and Wiz, to celebrate Bitcoin with Bitcoin Magazine. What's up, guys?
What's
Hey, Matt,
up?
how are you?
I think a lot of the listeners and viewers that are joining us right now are aware of who you guys are, but it'd be great if you could give a brief, introduction of what you've been up to this year in terms of Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ecosystem. You want to start, Wiz?
Yeah, so I'm Wiz. I work on mempool space, BISC, Liquid. I organize a meetup in Tokyo. I guess it's just the only Bitcoin meetup in Tokyo now. Bitcoinonly.com, 6102. I run like an ISP, have a bunch of servers and network and stuff, and I write a little bit of code here and there. But most of all, I'm just like a full-time Bitcoiner, self-sovereign kind of guy.
My name's Ketan. I am the co-founder of Ministry of Nodes, and we provide sort of video tutorials on how to run your own node and hold your own keys. We also do private consulting, one-on-one coaching sessions on how to, get up to speed with Bitcoin. And then throughout the year, I've been, going to meetups and going to, small little conferences like the Bitcoin Bush Bash that happened, setting up, Blockstream satellite and just playing around with self-sovereign tools. So that's what I've been up to.
I really love what you guys have been doing over there at Ministry of Nodes, helping Bitcoiners become more self-sovereign. To the listeners who are unaware, he's been doing that with our boy Stefan Livera. It's a joint project between the two of them. So I applaud you on that. So let's get into it. Today is January 2nd, 2021. At least where I live, I think it's like about to strike midnight by you guys, which is pretty exciting. The Bitcoin Genesis block, the first ever block, was mined on January 3rd, 2009. 12 years ago. It's been a long fucking time. A lot of progress since then. This day has since been used as a publication of so-called Proof of Keys Day, this will be the third year running of that. The main promoter of that has since left the space due to some unexplained shitcoinery. But I think the general premise and idea and concepts that were built around that day should definitely live forward. Self-custody today is more important than ever, and I really want to discuss why we Bitcoin and why it's important that we do it in a self-sovereign way where we reduce our reliance on third parties. And I really couldn't, I can't imagine a panel that I'd rather be talking about this with than you guys. So I'm pretty excited for it. So I think we should just jump into it. I'd like to start with Wiz. Wiz, to you, like, what does January 3rd mean?
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me to join the panel. I guess, January 3rd is just Bitcoin Day, right? It's the anniversary of the Genesis block, like you said. It's not really, I kind of, I don't like that coining it the Proof of Keys Day. I think that's kind of lame. You should always have your Bitcoin on your own keys on your hardware, and I'm sure you guys would agree. So I kind of wish that we would just call it Bitcoin Day. What do you think?
Maybe next year we'll call it Bitcoin Day. Or like we'll get Bitcoin Magazine to call it Bitcoin Day. We can just call it Bitcoin Day for the rest of this panel. It's fine by me. When the listeners are watching this, they're going to be watching this at the end of a full live stream event. So we can basically ahead of time dunk on the people who have already streamed, and we could say that they should have called it Bitcoin Day. How about that?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I agree. Every day should be proof of keys, right? So let's talk about why that's important. Why is it important to hold your own keys?
Yeah, I mean, if you use BISC, then your funds are always in your wallet anyway. So like it doesn't even make sense. Like on BISC, what are you going to do? You know, if you're using Bitcoin to the maximum cypherpunk, yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Ketan?
Well, as far as the majority of people, I just don't see them coming in via BISC. I hope that changes. I really do hope that changes. But the majority of people are buying on some form of centralized exchange, unfortunately. And so to be able to tell them, hey, you know what? It's a risk to leave them there, and you want to take ownership of them, I think is a worthwhile message to get out there, because I don't want to see a raft of regulation come in where people will have to ask for permission to transact with their money. And unfortunately, that is just the way that the cookie has crumbled at this point in time. I truly hope for 2021, we move to services like BISC and like HODL HODL and more like peer-to-peer transactions, maybe doing it, face-to-face, those sorts of things. I would love to see that. I just don't know if that's going to be the case. And so it is good to have days like this where we tell people and we push people to take that step of taking, if you're leaving keys or if you're leaving your coins on the exchange, you are at risk. And that is very important to get that message across.
Why don't you explain what that risk is?
Well, first of all, there's two. Well, the first risk is that the exchange can go down. It can be hacked. There have been instances in the past, particularly around 2013, 2014, with the Mt. Gox whole debacle, whereby people lost a lot of money. And the exchange went down, the server went down, they stopped withdrawals, there were long delays in processing withdrawals, and then they completely stopped. That could happen with any exchange. And so what we want to do is make sure that we are taking those coins off the exchange and putting them into our own custody. That is why it's important, because servers do go down, servers do get hacked, and exchanges are considered a honeypot. And so attackers will go after them. And it could also be an inside job as well. There's a lot of risks that are involved in creating those exchanges and having those huge honeypots there. And so to protect yourself from those risks, you should retrieve your coins.
What about those kind of newer, maybe they're not exchanges, but more like broker-dealer services where like I think River may be one of them, where they directly send the Bitcoin into your cold storage custody, self-custody,
yep.
So that they don't even custody funds or something. I'm not really familiar. I have never used the service, but
yeah, and Bull Bitcoin does that as well in Canada.
Right.
They don't hold any of your keys, or sorry, they don't hold keys on your behalf. It's not an IOU. They just send it, and to buy, you must provide the address to send it to.
And Strike.
And Strike as well. So these are some great services that are minimizing their risk of holding Bitcoin on behalf of their user base, which is, I think, a step in the right direction.
They build it directly into the user flow, which is kind of what you want to see, right?
Well, it seems like there's almost a kind of two different kinds of use cases, right? One where you actually want to leave funds on the exchange in the hot wallet for day trading or some kind of speculative or some kind of derivative, futures contracts, whatever people are using that hot wallet funds for. And then the other use case is just guys who want to stack sats, and they have no interest in ever having their funds on the exchange custody hot wallet, right? So I could see how, some people just sign up on an exchange and buy Bitcoin and then just neglect to withdraw it to their own custody. But maybe, we should push the other types of services more, like, BISC or River or Bull Bitcoin, these guys that are actually doing it directly into your cold storage at home. Because it seems like once you get set up that way, you're never going to screw it up, hopefully, right?
Well, I mean, I think so. So you have BISC and HODL, which never actually even take custody of your fiat or your Bitcoin, right? So that's like the ultimate, just straight up no custody whatsoever. And then you have KYC. And no KYC, right? Even more important, because they don't custody your private information, which could be just as valuable, if not more valuable, than your Bitcoin sometimes. And then you have the next one, which is like this custodial flow that's set up that you just pretty much reduce the trust as much as possible. And I kind of like, I hope that we see basically those types of services increase. And I think that's what we have seen happen, which is good. I mean, the early days of Bitcoin were more focused on these large centralized trading platforms, right? And now it's more of like an accumulation on ramp. So yeah, I do agree that that's good to see. But I think ultimately, so self custody of our coins is a two-step process. One is controlling your own keys, controlling your own private key. You have your private key and you have your public key. The public key is like a view key where you can see your transactions, you can see your balances, you can construct a transaction. The private key is like your spend key. It allows you to spend your transactions. So there's two things in a self-custody mindset that you need to be considering. You need to be protecting your public key for privacy reasons. If someone has access to that, they're able to see all of your transactions and your balances. And you want to protect your private key because if they have your private key, they could take all your money and spend your money. Fortunately, and then on top of that, you have the ability to use your own node. And when you interact with the Bitcoin network, you have to use a node to interact with the Bitcoin network. And if you're not using your own node, you're trusting someone else's node, both with verification, but more tangibly with your privacy. You're trusting them with your privacy. So we have these three key tenets, I guess, of self-custody of Bitcoin. And I think like, if you look at the last 2 years, I mean, we've come a long fucking way in terms of it being easier. Like I'm not trying to hide the fact that it's more difficult. Like a personal responsibility will always be more difficult, but I think we've made great strides. Wouldn't you guys agree?
100%. The services that are coming out right now to help you on your way, specifically for non-technical users, are just absolutely phenomenal now. If you look at open source software, Spectre Desktop is probably my pick on the list of one of the greatest initiatives that I have seen to come out, which I have been begging for and wanting to see, because it just makes my life easier to help people on board onto self-custody. Then you have all of these implementations, node implementations that are coming out. Umbrel. I don't know if you've seen some of the screenshots that they're putting out, but the UX on that is absolutely beautiful. To be able to run your own node and hold your own keys is getting easier. But again, you are right. Personal responsibility will always be a more difficult task than giving it to a trusted third party.
Yeah, the Umbrella project's pretty cool. Their new app store. We didn't announce it yet, but we've been working on the new mempool app for the Umbrella App Store, and it's going to be pretty sick, where you'll actually be running like your own block explorer locally on your own Raspberry Pi. So it kind of takes it one step further, like what Matt was saying with, when you either withdraw from the exchange or however you get your Bitcoin into your own cold storage, you actually want to verify it using your own node on your own hardware that you really do have real Bitcoin in your wallet. And that'll be, I think, one of the cool apps to get on your Raspberry Pi. But what do you guys run for your I guess home full node setups?
So I use a computer that I just bought, like a cheap computer. I chucked an SSD on there. It's a desktop. It's like a Dell Optiplex, and I've run Debian on that. And then I have loaded up all the apps that I want. So I put on Bitcoin Core. I layered on, a Dojo. I've layered on mempool.space. I've layered on all the apps that I think are necessary. I've got Lightning Network on mine. And basically, I've also produced a tutorial of exactly what I've done on my YouTube channel with the Ubuntu Notebox. So you can follow me along, and you can pretty much do what I do. I'm in the process of actually making a 2020 series, which is the Ubuntu Notebox with 20.04, and I'm going to take everyone through. And I've recorded most of it. I'm probably going to post it within the end of the month. So I'm pretty excited to show you how I run my own node. So if you want to follow along, you're more than welcome to.
Fuck yes, looking forward to that guide. Your guys are great. Shout out Ministry of Nodes YouTube. Just search Ministry of Nodes in YouTube. I guess kind of, bear markets are where like you just fuck around, experiment with new things. And we had so many new node platforms that came out. So like I'm looking at straightforward right now, and I have a Raspberry Blitz running, an Umbrel running, a Ronin Dojo running, and a Nodl running over there, just like directly across from me. I'm glad the stream isn't cutting in and out.
So Matt, which one's your production? Which one's your production environment? Like, what's the one that you're using?
So I have Join Market running on the Raspberry Blitz.
So you're using all of them for different use cases?
Well, not really, actually. The Ronin Dojo I was using for like my Dojo Samurai stack, but now I'm back over at the Nodl using that. Right. And then the Umbrel is more of like a test environment. But that new app store they released is fucking fantastic. It's slick as fuck. And I just really like what they're doing over there. But it's funny because I've just come full circle, because now I'm like, I have a multi-sig setup with Core plus Spectre on just a dedicated Linux box that doesn't even run 24/7. So like the other ones, it's important. Like the 24/7 node is important, I think, for two reasons. These dedicated boxes, whether you buy a pre-built like a Nodl, or you build your own like an Umbrel or a Raspberry Blitz, the dedicated node has three main benefits. Let's go. The first one is very easy to connect to mobile wallets. And mobile wallets, you need them 24/7 because you're using your phone 24/7 and you're pushing back, through Tor to your node at home or at the office. The second thing is CoinJoin and Lightning. Both of these require hot wallets that are constantly doing things. And then the third thing is what Wiz was saying, like these different utilities, like mempool.space, just blockchain explorers in general. If you want to look up transaction data, look up that kind of stuff, is very useful to have 24/7. But if you're talking about like on-chain coldish storage, like trying to secure your stash for like long-term, you don't need your node to run 24/7. You just really need it to catch up when you're receiving transactions or doing anything. So it's an interesting trade-off balance you have there.
That's a good point, Matt. Like you can, obviously the best is to run your own full node on a Raspberry Pi or something, but you don't have to, right? You can it's all trade-offs. You could, instead of trusting one person like your Uncle Jim or whoever you do trust in real life, you can use their node. But if you don't have an Uncle Jim, you can kind of decentralize. You could say, all right, I'm going to check it against 10 different block explorers out there that are run by different people, and they all verify the same thing. And if you all access to them over Tor or something to protect your privacy, then sure, that's not as great as having your own full node, but that's still pretty good security and privacy wise. And a lot of these apps, like wallet apps, will actually have like a default configuration where it uses the developer or the contributor's full node to start, so that you can just quickly install your wallet and start using it right away. But they almost all have the option to use your own full node, by pointing it to like an Electrum server or some other standardized protocol, where you can just connect to your Raspberry Pi over Tor very easily, either Lightning or on-chain, whatever wallets you're doing. And so like Bisq, for example, has, I think, for Bitcoin nodes, I think there's more like 16 Bitcoin nodes that are run by different developers. And some people run a few of them. Like I think I have like 4 of them are actually mine. But you get like a nice mix of different, like it's very unlikely that all the contributors of Bisq are going to suddenly turn evil all at the same exact time. Or if you're using the Spectre wallet or the Electrum wallet, these Electrum servers, like the community would realize very quickly if anyone did anything malicious with these full nodes. So it's not the end of the world to use somebody else's full node. Especially.
Well, from like a verification point of view, right? It's basically been a theoretical risk this whole time, right? Like we've been talking about this risk. We said 12 years since the Genesis block. I mean, that's obviously before my time, but I assume people have been talking about this risk for almost that entire time. And we basically have had no wide scale like verification attacks where like a trusted third party node was telling you that you had Bitcoin when you didn't.
Okay, I've got a story for you. So Bitcoin ATM in Tokyo, these are the good old days before Bitcoin was even regulated in Japan. This Bitcoin ATM opens up in a co-working space in Ginza, and it uses blockchain.info's API for its backend. And the way it worked is that it would display a QR code, you would send the Bitcoin, and on 0 confirmations, it would dispense out the cash, like Japanese yen banknotes. And so at the time, I don't know if this is still the case, but blockchain.info's verification was, well, shitty. It was just, I mean, I have screenshots where Satoshi's coins had moved on blockchain.info, but they had not moved on any other explorers. And it was simply because they had like rolled their own implementation of the Bitcoin consensus rules or signature verification, or they just made a ton of mistakes in those. These are the old days. And so to demonstrate, I actually crafted like a false signature for a Bitcoin transaction. And I broadcasted it using the blockchain.info broadcast page. And sure enough, the ATM gave me cash on a totally invalid Bitcoin transaction. So, I mean, yeah.
But that's more, I mean, I'm not going to make excuses. I mean, but that was more, I would say, they were being inept than being malicious, right? Like there's always been this fear that someone like a Ledger or something who's running these large nodes that a lot of people are using could start fucking around with you intentionally to make money. And we really, I guess it's always a fear, and people should just, reduce that risk. But it's one of those things that kind of plays out with the market. People would notice, they would get destroyed as a company, and no one would ever use them again. But that would obviously suck for the user. But with something like Bisq, I think
we have bonds.
A more tangible risk of trusting another, a third party node that's not your own node is the privacy aspect. And Bisq solves that because it defaults through Tor. It has it bundled in.
Yeah, so with Bisq, we actually take it a step further. So I actually have to post bonds to the Bisq DAO, which is quite a large amount of money just to, be able to get the privilege of running a node for the Bisq network. And if I fucked around or did anything malicious, then the DAO could confiscate that bond. So there's a huge financial disincentive for me, because that's how crypto anarchy works, right? You have to financially incentivize what you want people to do and financially disincentivize what you want people not to do. And so Like I run all the seed nodes and the price nodes. I also have like a price feed service for Bisq and a bunch of other things where, like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 people run these trusted nodes. So it's not like centralized. It's not like super centralized or anything. It's a little bit decentralized, but we do have both the financial bonds that we're putting up, and we also have like the reputational aspect of it too, right? So nobody, if I did anything, nobody would ever want to work with me again after that, right? So
a completely different trade-off balance than something like Ledger servers, or than something like Electrum servers, which are completely public and anyone can run them, right? Like this is it's a completely different trade-off balance. And of course, I mean, you can use Bisq with your own node as well, which is the idea,
that's right. That's what I was going to say. Bisq, I think there's an input page where you can put in your the RPC details, and away it goes, and it sort of looks that up as well. So
yeah, it's like automatically detected. If you have Bitcoin Core running on your computer and you start Bisq, it says, "Oh, I see you have Bitcoin Core running. I'll just use that instead of somebody else's node."
Right, which is what Spectre does. Which, by the way, to the listeners, if you're listening to this, my talk with Ben Kaufman has already happened, which is one of the developers of Spectre. So I'm looking forward to that. But that was already happened, but it's in the future for me. But anyway, I like this concept. I really like this concept of one software and then Bitcoin Core. So you have like these different packages that you install on the same machine as Bitcoin Core, and like that's your configuration. Because I think like that's where it gets really easy. And then you don't have to deal with any kind of routing errors or using Tor to connect remotely or something. Like if you just have a dedicated machine, you have Core, and then you have whatever software package you want. Good.
Well, it works for some use cases, but not for others, right? Like for example, mempool space is a good example because it requires an index of literally everything, all the blockchain data, all the fee calculations, addresses. So, which is just a huge amount of data. And to get that working on a Raspberry Pi is a huge challenge, actually. So there's some apps like Bisq that work very well with just Bitcoin Core only. But there's other apps where you need like an Electrum server in front of it to index the blockchain to some point. Maybe you don't need everything, but that was one of the big challenges, getting mempool space to run on a Raspberry Pi. So up until now, it's not even released yet, but we only had like mempool v1, which was just this very simple mempool visualizer. But now we're going to have like the full Explorer running on a Raspberry Pi. So that was
awesome.
Basically like the past year of work.
That's cool. I'm looking forward to that actually, because I'll do a video tutorial on that. I've already done the one on mempool.space for version 1 actually. So yeah, that'll be as part of the series as well.
We're just gonna like forget version 1 ever existed. We're just gonna go straight to version 2.
All right, nice.
I mean, it's a couple years ago. It's been a lot of work done on the project since then. So yeah.
I mean, but I think that like aligns, that pretty much aligns with my vision here, right? Is that that's a more advanced user function.
Yeah.
Right. Like let's
for the basic newcomer, I think like something like having Bitcoin Core on your local PC as well as Spectre Desktop on your local machine as well, alongside a hardware wallet. And you have this nice flow of information.
Right. And then maybe some
kind
of coin join implementation that just hooks right into Bitcoin Core, right? And then you just have those 3 things, and then you're pretty fucking self-sovereign. And then if you wanted to have like a dedicated box and have your mobile wallets connect to it and have an always-on Lightning node and have mempool.space, then you can jump into that dedicated box area, right?
Yeah, that sounds like a good level up, right? Because everyone already has a computer and they can just install Bitcoin on that and get started. But then at some point they want a Raspberry Pi, at some point they want a hardware wallet, crypto steel backup, whatever other accessories as they get more and more down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I've noticed that actually. So once you get someone self-sovereign with their keys, they want things very quickly. They want coin join, they want Lightning, they want, that it just goes very, very quickly after that. And so they start looking at other avenues. But I think the basic newcomer can just, you look to a setup that solves a particular purpose, like, for example, cold storage or custody, and then they can choose which one they want to up their game from there. But I think the main driver here is to just get them off the exchange. Like, let's get them into a nice, secure setup, and make sure that they know what a Bitcoin transaction even looks like. You should start off with just taking $50 off the exchange and playing with it on your mobile phone. If you've never done a Bitcoin transaction, I'd encourage you to do one, and use a phone to do that. So at least you know what you need to protect. The wallet gives you the 12 words. You now have some sense of ownership and accountability for it. And as that price goes up, you start to now think, all right, well, now I have this $50 is now $500, which is then going to go into $5,000, which is then going to go into $50,000, and then it just keeps going. And you kind of just go, whew, okay, I better lift my game here, and then you're financially incentivized to start learning about Bitcoin a little bit more.
I guess like the newbies, when they first show up at the meetup or however they get into Bitcoin, it's always like a similar seduction where they, maybe they'll buy like $100. Like that's like a common thing at a bar. You'd be like, all right, I'll give you $100. Just give me some Bitcoin on like a phone wallet, right? Then it's like a bar napkin. They wrote the 12 words on a bar napkin, and I'm like, no, don't show anybody the words. Like it's like the typical newbie level. But they very quickly, like within a matter of days or weeks, they get a Trezor or some hardware wallet, and they start loading up a lot of money on some exchange, and they're all in by that point.
Well, I mean, that's always my favorite intro to someone who's like a real life friend or acquaintance or someone I just fucking met, that I'm shilling Bitcoin to, like, usually drunk in a bar, is to send them some, right? You send them a small amount to a phone wallet that you tell them to install. Right now I really like Blue Wallet and Samurai Wallet if you're on Android, but Blue Wallet is multi-platform. And you send it to them, and then once, you send them a little bit, then you have them send it back to you. You have them fuck around with it, right? And there's something to be said about that, because when they come into this flow on like a KYC service, it really butchers what Bitcoin's about. Like it hits you with like all these identification shit, and it's just so not Bitcoin. That it fucks with their head. I feel like it fucks with their intro to Bitcoin. It fucks with like their conceptualization of Bitcoin. And I think one of the things us Bitcoiners fail to realize a lot of times is the status quo for digital money is that self-custody doesn't exist. It's not even a thing. So like they can't even contemplate that they like you put these 12 words into like a different device, and like they show up and you have access to them, and you don't have to like prove your identity or do any of this stuff. Like it's just not even a possibility. It's not even a consideration. So they need to be, people need to basically be explicitly told and shown that they can even fucking do it in the first place, right?
Yep. I think the magic of a Bitcoin transaction shows a lot about the permissionless nature of Bitcoin. That it didn't go through a bank, it didn't go through anyone else, and you could be anywhere in the world and it can happen. And I think that is the beauty of Bitcoin, and people should start, transacting the way that it was intended, which is trustless or trust minimized, and using their own Bitcoin nodes, and just doing Bitcoin transactions the way that they were meant to be. I think that is definitely something to be said, and an experience that you should have.
Yeah, for sure. It's so hard to, it depends on like what level they're coming in from, right? Like they could be, like a salaryman, like a salaried employee working their whole life, 20, 30 years for some fiat money. And, you try explaining Bitcoin to them, and they'll like the cognitive dissonance. Right? They don't want to hear it. They'll defend like fiat money to you. Like, this is why we need like whatever crazy, fiat brainwashing they've done their entire life. And that's why I stopped giving away like Bitcoin. Like I used to give away like $5 of Bitcoin to people all the time back in, you know, the early days, and they all lost it. Like 90% of the people lost it.
100%. Yeah.
Dude, and not only that, but it was like a negative thing. They like took it as like a spam email. They're like, oh, what is this? Like they don't like, they would kind of set up the wallet just to like be polite. But I realized that it was too early, right? Now I'm sure you could give people free Bitcoin all day long and they'd love it, right? But like back then, it was really like worthless money. And one guy, he showed me the wallet that I made for him back in 2013. The $5 was now like exactly like you said, Ketan, like $500 or $5,000. It was like literally like a $20 turned into some, you know, sizable amount of money. And I think like, damn, all those other people just totally lost out.
But that's the worst, is the random text you get like 4 years later. It's like, dude, like, remember when we set up that Bitcoin wallet or whatever? Like, can you get that for me? It's like, did you save anything that I told you to save? Did you save any of those things? And it's almost always lost.
Dude, I'll never forget that. Like, even like a couple of years ago, I remember, setting up someone with a wallet, and they wrote the words on a bar napkin. And like at the end of the night, they threw away the napkin. And I was so pissed, right? Because I was like they literally just threw away the Bitcoin that I gave them. Like zero respect for it, right? Like maximum disrespect.
But it's not, it's most of the time I've noticed it's not intentional. I mean, it's not even, there's
sure,
very
but
few things in our lives that maybe not in our lives, but there's very few things in most people's lives where if their phone gets destroyed by a bus or falls in a toilet or something, like they can't recover something that was on that device. Right? Like there's very few things. Like one of the things that comes to mind for me, at least, is like if you don't back up your 2-factor codes well, your like OTP codes or something. And like the average user isn't doing that anyway.
Well, that's the real maybe the moral of the lesson of self-custody or self-sovereignty. Like people will always trade pretty much any security, privacy, or freedom that they have for convenience, right? Like before, Facebook or any of these centralized services, you could make your own website. You could put photos on your own website, but nobody did. And then as soon as Facebook came along, they're like, oh, click, click, click. I can just upload all my personal private photos to Facebook. And it's so easy, right? And I'm going to upload all my contacts and add all my friends. And, and so when it comes to money, maybe you don't want to make that same mistake, right?
But I think there's a lesson there. There's definitely a lesson in self-hosting. I know that like when and I think views change as well over time. So when you do have something to protect, a lot of my views changed. It was, okay, privacy, well, I have nothing to hide, so go for it. But wait, hold on. Now I have something to protect. I don't want, like when I go through an airport, someone searching my phone. What the hell? No way. So these mindset changes. You start talking about self-defense. You start talking about weapons. You start, these sorts of conversations start to get triggered once you've actually gone down the self-sovereignty path. What if someone does this? What if someone does that? The mind just keeps going. Like it's just this, it continuously just ticks away as to, an adversarial mindset. And I don't think many people are used to that concept. And so when you start to think about these adversarial mindsets and things that could go wrong, you start to patch them up pretty quickly. Like, as you said, a paper's not good enough, a napkin's not good enough, so you put it on a crypto steel or some sort of steel device. These are all sorts of things that just go with having something to protect now. And especially as that price goes up, now you've really got something to protect.
Well, it's like a generational thing, right? It depends on when you grew up and what the internet was like when you were. So, like, I guess I'm kind of an older guy now, but like when I grew up, there was no like I grew up on IRC, right? Like if you were not in the channel when someone said a message, you didn't get it. Like it was that simple, right? And now you have like literally every instant messaging service, whether having full end-to-end security and privacy or not, they all freaking save the messages to a database because of course they do, right? So now everyone's used to this, like the cloud will just kind of save you. Like you said, you could drop your phone in a toilet. Well, I'm using the iCloud, so all my data is in the cloud. I'm like the only person who, I complained to Matt the other day. I said, when I download the MP3s from TFTC podcast, like you don't have the cover art or the metadata. And you know why? Because I'm putting them on my 20-year-old iPod Nano, like because I self-host my podcasts.
Have you listened to the new Citadel Dispatch episodes yet?
I listened to the one with NVK.
Did you see?
I didn't.
Did you see I put all the information there for you.
Really? No, I haven't. It's not on my.
Because Marty
manages. Yet. I haven't seen it.
Marty manages the audio files for the
I see.
The regular episodes, and then for Citadel Dispatch, I'm in charge of that. So I made sure from we've only done 2 episodes, but they both have the information there, and it's only for you. I don't know.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I'm just gonna make like my own podcast, like website, just on my own, just for myself, not to like share with other people, because the whole point, like podcasts are just MP3s, and like in my day, if you wanted to listen to music, you had to go on like Napster or whatever the peer-to-peer thing and download the MP3s. Nobody freaking downloads MP3s anymore. They just listen to it on streaming services. And so what happens if your like YouTube account gets deleted or something? Now all of your data is just gone. I would be like the only guy who took the time to like download it all and archive it all just to like have it for my own. Like what if my my internet goes down? Oh, no worries. I have like all my photos and all my content like right here. So it's like a self-sovereignty thing. It's just, I don't want to trust other people, but it's more that when I grew up, there was no other solution. Like that was the only way to do it. Like if you had there was no Spotify like 20 years ago, right? And so now if like kids these days, they grow up and they no, like really, it's like a mindset thing. If you grow up where everything's just in the cloud, that's like the natural order of the universe, is that it's like the sunshine and the air that you breathe and the gravity that holds you. Like you don't think about those things, and just the data's in the cloud. That's how you think about it. And so that's like, why I'm like, one of very few people who like runs their own ISP just for themselves or something crazy. It's just like, I grew up in Hawaii. Like there was no way to like get internet. Like I had to like, work at an ISP and figure out how to do it just because I wanted to have fast internet for myself. And so if you grow up doing it a certain way, you'll always, and this is why fiat people can't let go of their fiat mindset, right? It's because they've been working for that fiat paycheck and paying their fiat taxes the whole lifetime. They're not going to accept Bitcoin as their Lord and Savior. But kids these days, if you're like less than 12 years old, you've never known a world without Bitcoin. So it's as natural to you as the sunshine or the air and the water. So it's very natural for kids these days. Like, oh yeah, Bitcoin is just another app on my phone. Like, of course I'm going to use Bitcoin. Like, I'm not going to go into like a physical bank branch and have to like get all these weird documents and KYC. Like, fuck that. Why would I do that? Like, the user experience is so shitty. Like, Bitcoin's a million times better in every possible way. It's like Michael Saylor's always talking about how it dematerializes all these industries. It's true, right? Like, who's going to want to use a bank 10 or 20 years from now?
But I think there's a lesson here, right? Because using Bitcoin properly is the more difficult option. It's the more difficult option. It gets easier every day, but it's a more difficult option. I think that's a feature, not a bug. The reason it's more difficult is because you actually own your own money, right? You're actually self-hosting. You're actually controlling your own wealth, your own data. Now, we saw with podcasting, right? It was very raw in the beginning. It was MP3s through RSS. You download them, you listen to them on, whatever player. And that's been hidden from the user now, right? The average user, to make podcasting more accessible and make podcasting more useful, or not useful, but easier to use, it's been hidden. Most users think like Apple is just like this, like Apple Podcasts is just providing it, via their service that they don't understand what's going on in the background. They're not controlling their own data. They're just streaming it from these third-party apps. So as much as I think we should improve UX on like the self-custody side and stuff, I think we got to be a little bit careful as an industry hiding absolutely everything from the user, right? Like we need Bitcoin users in the future to be educated about what's going on behind the scenes. It can't just be all hidden behind trusted third parties. Otherwise, we'll probably have an issue on our hands, right?
I would agree with that as well. I don't think you can sort of hide everything by a facade and then just tell someone to do only these sets of buttons only. You kind of need to go deeper and actually self-host. And that's what I've been doing as well. Like I have been unlearning all of this and then learning to self-host. I am absolutely amazed with the power of what an internet connection can do, because now I'm hosting my own Nextcloud service. So I'm de-Googling myself. I've got my own contacts. I've got my own calendar. I'm hosting it all. And I know now how to do the back end of that. I've got my own password manager, my own instance of Bitwarden. And then here is Wiz, who's got his own damn ISP. It's like, I got to get to this guy's level now.
No, just trust me. It's a money pit. That just stick with the stats. That's like even the mempool sponsorship money. Like we bought all these cool servers, but it's always like a fiat. Like any kind of hosting business or ISP business, it's a fiat business, and it's very capital intensive. Or like if you do like a mining business, it's like $1 million to set up a mining facility. And if you would have taken that $1 million worth of Bitcoin that you had to sell, and all the operating expenses, mostly just electricity, and all the money you put into it, like you might be up in fiat from your mining business, but you're going to be down in Bitcoin. You literally should have just done nothing. Like that's like every mistake I made in the past almost 10 years now since I've been in Bitcoin was just having weak hands and putting my Bitcoin into some infrastructure that's going to supposedly make me more Bitcoin. And sure enough, it didn't. So I just need to be stronger, right?
It's hard to outperform the best performing asset of the last 12 years.
Exactly.
What do you think about pushing for people to earn Bitcoin for their goods and services as a method of acquiring Bitcoin? Is that something that is viable for some parts of the population?
Well, absolutely. I mean, BTC Pay Server, like there's a million ways to, work and earn money or sell products. And yeah, why not? Like there's no KYC, right? If you're selling stuff or consult, whatever services you provide. So yeah, like everyone needs to like work and earn money anyway. Wouldn't you rather earn sats than fiat?
I mean, the perfect example is Wiz just mentioned mempool.space's new community sponsorship feature, where community members who enjoy using mempool.space were able to donate to support it. And he launched it probably at the perfect fucking time. Like, I think we're up like 3x since you launched that, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. No, I mean, like, yeah, I think we had like 53 sponsors, and it's like maybe we got like, and everyone did like at least 1 million sats. So yeah, it's like probably got like 6 million sats or something, which is pretty amazing for just like donations, right? Because I guess that's just like $16,000. Yeah, like it was like a
but at the time it was like 5K or 6K.
True.
Like a couple months
when you sponsored the site, yes, Matt. Thank you for your sats.
When I sponsored, it was 1 million sats for like $100, right? And now it's $300.
That's true. But that's where if you consider fiat value, right? Or if you're only thinking if your like mental unit of account is sats, then it's
1
always
BTC equals 1 BTC. Right?
But then costs are going down, right? You should price everything in sats. I mean, that's like, I think the new thing that people should really like come away with when they come into the space is that they should literally price every single fucking thing in their life in sats. And then that's how you conceptualize true FOMO.
Yeah.
He's
Don't
thinking
be
about
like
it.
me. Don't be like me. Don't be up in fiat. You want to be up in sats.
Up
That's
in
the
sats.
biggest mistake, dude. Like so many times. Like I can tell you so many stories. Just like literally do not that. And I think it was American Hodl who tweeted something like, he's like, all you need to do to be rich in life is like buy Bitcoin, withdraw it from the exchange, and then do nothing. And number 3, do nothing is by far the hardest fucking thing. You'll like, what about this new investment? Or I could put like, like no, just do nothing. Just sit on those sats and do nothing. That is the hardest thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would go take it a step further. Like you're trying to accumulate as much as possible, right? But yeah, I mean, if you look back, the big thing that I've been talking about lately is like you just look back at like your take-home pay priced in sats, and then that one like really hits you hard because like I'll never make as many sats as I made, last year. That's my take-home pay, like my equivalent take-home pay. I've hit my peak. Now it's just a sprint, a marathon to the finish.
Yeah. I have this one email in my inbox from many years ago where BitMEX made me some like amazing offer to like borrow all this Ethereum Classic or something that I had mined, and I turned them down because for whatever reason, like if I would have just taken that deal, it would have like locked up all my money in Bitcoin essentially in the most perfect deal ever, and I would have been set for life. And I just look at that email all the time. Like I should print it out and frame it on the wall. Like there's always these opportunities, right? Where like, I had 100 Bitcoin on my phone, or you could have, you
just
I'm sure you guys
can't live in the
stories.
past. You can't live in the past. You got to just do your best. And just keep your head down, right? And keep moving forward. Like I always think that's the wrong way. I mean, like, and like we kind of moved away from self-sovereignty, but I enjoy this conversation, so I'm just going to continue it. Like a lot of people, like the famous one is Laszlo, right? So it's like, okay, he paid $10,000 for 10,000 sats for a couple pizzas or whatever. I think that's the wrong way to look at it, right? Like this guy was already in a place where he discovered Bitcoin and was accumulating sats. Me, who had no idea who Bitcoin was at the same exact time, was also wasting sats on pizzas. I just didn't even know what sats were, right? So like this idea that like, oh, like only Bitcoiners who spend things should regret spending their Bitcoin is like a fucking ridiculous concept. It's like anyone who's not net accumulating sats every year is short Bitcoin and is losing, regardless if you discovered it yet or not.
Yes, that is a good take to make yourself feel better about spending. Yes.
Well, it goes back to like what you said earlier about having your internal mental unit of account is pricing everything in sats. If you go back and you do think, well, how many sats was I making as my take-home salary back in 2013? Like they were sats, you just didn't know it at the time, and you didn't convert it or sell it. Even though I might have actually had those sats in my Bitcoin wallet and then ended up selling them, it didn't really matter because the opportunity was always there, whether they were sats or not. I could have just, parked like $1,000 in 2009 into sats too. Like, but did you do it? Right. Like,
right. Okay. Well, let's just try and bring it back to self-sovereignty for a little bit before we end this conversation. New user listening to this stream, they're like, fuck, I'm short on sats because we just FOMO'd them on the last 5 minutes there. I have some, they're on, like a Cash App, I guess, or a Coinbase, or a River or a Kraken, one of these exchanges. They don't have any self-custody yet. They don't use their own node. They don't own a hardware wallet. They're relatively new Bitcoiner. What's their first step? What's the process here?
For me, I would say do your first Bitcoin transaction with a small amount using a mobile phone. I think that step there is probably one of the easiest ways and quick to start understanding what self-sovereignty is about and the words that you need to protect and what you need to protect. So $50 off an exchange like your Cash App, have it and play around with that $50 and get comfortable with receive and send and just play around with it. That's, I think, your first step if you're completely green. Then you want to move up as we've discussed, just move up that ladder into getting hardware wallets and metal and running your own node. And then, moving to Spectre Desktop and Bitcoin Core and all of that sort of stuff. But I think if you don't understand the beauty of doing a Bitcoin transaction, it will be lost on you when you go straight to these hardware wallets and straight to Spectre and all this sort of stuff. Do a Bitcoin transaction would be my recommendation. Just do it.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. Like with a very small amount, you don't have to worry that you're going to like lose all your money if you screw it up. And so you can, for example, I usually suggest to people to buy like a hardware wallet like Trezor or something that plugs into like Electrum or Spectre now is the cool wallet to use. But like, set up your hardware wallet, make your seed backup, send like $5 worth of Bitcoin to it, and then wipe your device and restore from the backup. Can you get that $5 back? Pretend like you actually destroyed your device by dropping it into the toilet or something, right? And then you'll feel much more comfortable after you wipe it a few times. And, maybe you do lose the $5, maybe, but then that's also like part of the learning lesson. I think everybody loses sats at one point or another.
If you have it, you're probably doing something wrong.
I mean, either getting doxxed from like, or some kind of scam or some kind of screw up, like unintentionally just, or you lose your seed phrase backup or whatever it was. You forget your passphrase, Matt. Like there's so many.
I think that's an important element that people miss, right? I think you both covered it pretty well there, but the getting comfortable with it, right? I think if you look at the majority of times people have lost Bitcoin or had Bitcoin stolen for them, it's because of lack of comfort, right? So this going through this whole process of sending, receiving, destroying, restoring, backing up, doing everything multiple times, getting really comfortable with it, is probably the number one rule, right? The number one thing that people should be considering here.
Yes, get comfortable with Bitcoin and how it works and what the intricacies are. I think that is some really good advice. Just get comfortable over what you are doing.
Yeah, I think if you set a few sats to yourself first, and you can experiment, you can play around without having to worry about it. That's the best advice.
This was a great conversation, guys. I want to thank both of you for joining me. I want to thank the viewers. I want to thank Bitcoin. I want to thank all the Bitcoiners out there, and I want to thank Bitcoin Magazine for hosting this conversation. I'm your host, Matt Odell. Stay humble, stack sats.
There are many places to buy Bitcoin. They collect your personal information and jeopardize your privacy. KYC is the illicit activity. BISC is open source. It does not collect user data. You keep your private keys, create or take offers to trade peer-to-peer, and keep your Bitcoin private and secure.
What is up, Bitcoiners? Welcome to Bitcoin Magazine's Proof of Key celebration. For the next 15 minutes, I am going to be teaching you guys how to go from zero to fully self-sovereign Bitcoin usage with multisig. You guys, this is one of the best setups that we've had to date. It combines a good old-fashioned pruned Bitcoin core node and an awesome open source project that has just come out, Spectre Wallet. So Spectre Desktop is built on top of Bitcoin Core. You do not need Electrum. You do not need anything other than downloading a Bitcoin Core node and then using Spectre to interface directly with that node. So in this video, I am going to download Bitcoin Core. I'm going to download Spectre. I am going to set up a 2 of 3 multisig with 3 awesome hardware wallets. The first is industry leading security with the Cold Card Mark III. The second is the OG Bitcoin hardware wallet, the Trezor. And lastly is the cutting edge Kobo Vault, which is used and is industry leading in terms of its PSBT signing through QR code. There are trade-offs with all 3 of these wallets, especially with the Kobo and the Trezor. But one of the keys to using multisig, especially with your own node, is that you don't actually have to trust any one of these manufacturers because your wallet is going to be effectively created and generated by all 3, and you need at least 2 in order to sign. So you are downloading a full node on your laptop, on your MacBook, since that's what a lot of people use. It's only going to take up a few gigabytes of memory since it's a pure pruned node. And then we are going to use Spectre, which is built right on top of Bitcoin Core with these 3 commodity hardware wallets in order to hodl our Bitcoins without having to trust anyone. This is better than Coinbase. This is better than Ledger Live. This is better than almost anything else out there. And again, you can use a laptop you already have and about $200 worth of Bitcoin hardware wallets, and you are absolutely good to go. So let's just start walking through the first steps. Step 1 is you need to download a Bitcoin Core node. So you can go to bitcoin.org and go and download a core node for the operating system of your preference. I'm going to be downloading a Mac node. Next is you need to go to spectre.solutions and download the open source Spectre desktop wallet. So this is a preview of what it's going to look like, and it's going to show you how to use it for multisig. They support almost every single hardware wallet out there, and then it will lead you to their GitHub page where you can download the software. Remember, guys, when you download this software, you need to be checking their PGP keys. I really like this guide on how to set up Bitcoin Core from Keep It Simple BTC. So the website is keepitsimplebitcoin.com. Kiss is freaking awesome. He is a friend of Bitcoin Magazine, and he puts out absolutely incredible content for Bitcoiners that is focused on teaching you how to use this stuff right. So this guide in particular is about how to use Bitcoin Core properly so you can watch his complete video. He also timestamps the most important things, and at the first minute, he shows you how to verify your PGP key for both. You can use it for Core as well as Spectre. Let's jump into what this software actually looks like and feels like. Okay, guys, so once you have downloaded Bitcoin Core, the wallet is a really simple interface. You don't actually have to even do anything with it, but that's what Bitcoin Core looks like. It takes about, I don't know, 3 to 4 days to download Bitcoin Core, and then again, verify it completely without trusting anyone else. And then from there, it will become a prune node and just run and keep up with the blockchain every single time you open it up. It is pretty easy. It's pretty easy for your node, your laptop, to catch back up with the chain head once it's been completely fully downloaded. And you can just close this. You don't need it anymore. Next is Spectre. So this is Spectre Desktop. They have really created an awesome onboarding process to get you going. If you download a Bitcoin Core directly to your laptop and there are no issues, it's configured correctly, Spectre should just automatically recognize it. But if it doesn't, you can click over here and they have a step-by-step process. As you can see here, I had it auto detect off, so I can just show you guys. I'm gonna test it. So as you can see, auto detect worked. I have this connected to Bitcoin Core, and I can start adding wallets and devices to Spectre. Really quickly, if you are having any issues with Spectre recognizing Bitcoin Core on your laptop, most likely it is because you need to put different settings in your configuration file. So if you look down in the show notes, there should be a way for you to grab and get into your Bitcoin application support file and find the configuration file. And then from there, I also have instructions on how to use Rodolfo Novak, the creator of the Cold Card. He maintains best practices for a Bitcoin full node configuration file. So there will be a GitHub link in the show notes to take you guys there. Grab his file from GitHub, replace your configuration file with Rodolfo's configuration file, and then voila, you will notice that Spectre immediately finds your Bitcoin full node on your laptop. All right, guys. So step number 1 is I need to put all of my hardware wallets onto here. So first and foremost is Cold Card. This is the best hardware wallet out there, and it is one of the main wallets that I'm using for all of my cold storage. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Add Device. It's going to have a wide menu of different devices that they support. They pretty much support every single hardware wallet. I'm going to go click on Cold Card, and then if you plug in your Cold Card, you're going to hit on Get via USB. If you're using your SD card, you're going to click on Use the SD card. So I'm going to click in on that. I have the file already on my laptop, and boom. There we go. We have my multi-sig signatures and wallet uploaded. And then I'm going to click on Add Device. And now I want to add another device. Next is going to be the Kobo Vault. So the Kobo Vault is really cool. I'm going to name it really quick. So the Kobo Vault is really cool because it uses QR codes in order to maintain its air-gapped signing. So I don't have to plug anything into this Kobo Vault. I'm actually just going to use my webcam in order to scan the QR code to give the proper information over to Spectre Wallet. So next step is I pull up my QR code. I have to hit scan QR code, and boom. There you go. There's my multi-sig signature for Kobo. Gonna hit Add Device. Now I need to add one more signature for my 2 of 3 multi-sig. Last is going to be the good old-fashioned Trezor. I'm going to plug this one in through USB, so it's not going to be with air-gapped like the Cold Card and the Kobo. But if you think of it, this can be your third signature. This can be your backup signature. Plugging the Trezor in. And one of the best things about using Trezor on Spectre is that when you use Trezor on Spectre, you don't actually have to rely on Trezor Bridge, Trezor's website, in order to sign into your Trezor. So a lot of other folks that use Trezor do actually link back to Trezor's centralized website, which it's just like not Bitcoin. It's not a Bitcoin way to use hardware. It's to use someone's server every time you want to log into that hardware. That doesn't really matter though. Spectre fixes this. Spectre does not use any sort of link up to Trezor's bridge. As you can see, the pin pad pops up right here. So I'm going to plug in my pin. Boom. All of the wallets have been uploaded. Add device. And I am going to create my multisig wallet. So I have my Kobo Vault, my cold card, and my Trezor. I need to select all 3 wallets, and now I'm going to hit continue. So I'm choosing all the parameters. So I'm choosing SegWit. I'm choosing 2 out of 3. Here are my 3 signers, and I am going to go over here and I'm going to name this. I'm going to call this Bitcoin Magazine Test. Create wallet. Okay, so my wallet is created. Now, this is extremely important. This is my backup PDF. This is the instructions in an emergency where I lose one of these devices and I lose this laptop that has all the map effectively to my Bitcoin balance. This PDF is the backup. So you want to put this in a safe place. You want to encrypt this and you want to be really, really safe with this. So I'm going to hit continue. Next is you need to get the cold card and the Kobo Vault synced up so that way they know the rest of the multisig wallet information. So because the Trezor is already plugged in, it has the information. So it knows what the multisig is. But we need to show the Kobo Vault and we need to transfer the information over to the cold card so both of these devices know about the signing information that were committed by the other devices in the quorum. So first I'm going to hit show QR code. And then on my Kobo Vault, I'm going to hit import multisig wallet. And I'm going to use my device to scan. Okay, I'm confirming the details. And I hit confirm. So now the full multisig wallet is on this device, as in this device knows exactly how to retrieve the wallet. Next is the cold card. So the cold card takes a couple more steps because it doesn't have the QR code scanning. It still uses PSBT. So what I'm going to do is the cold card uses the micro USB. So I'm going to plug in the micro USB to my computer and transfer it all over. So I'm going to save the cold card file, take that file and put it into my SD card, eject the SD card and put it into my cold card. So I want to go to my cold card after I put in the SD card and I go to multisigs and then I hit import from SD card. It's the first option. It's going to show me the name of the wallet. It shows me the 2 of 3, and all the information about my cosigners. I'm going to click accept and now it is saved onto this wallet. Boom. All the information for that multisig is now on this device. The last step here is to verify that these addresses are in fact being generated by the wallet that you created. The way to do that is you need to hit display addresses on device. So we have this address here, and I'm going to hit display address on device. It needs to detect a device, so I'm going to plug the Trezor back in. All right, so now the Trezor is showing me the exact address that is displayed on the screen. That's it, guys. I just confirmed this multi-sig address, and on the Trezor, I can hit show me the QR code and scan directly from the Trezor if I want to maximize the security of the transaction here. Hit continue and boom. So you guys, we downloaded Bitcoin Core. We connected it to Spectre Wallet. We connected Spectre Wallet to 3 everyday hardware wallets, and we created a 2 of 3 multi-sig wallet for us to use in a completely self-sovereign way to hodl our Bitcoin and use Bitcoin. And then we verified that all of the address information that we would be seeing and sending our Bitcoins to on Spectre Wallet is in fact also verified on our 3 individual hardware wallets. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful. This is CK from Bitcoin Magazine. I hope you learned a lot and that you are enjoying the Bitcoin price and this January 3rd presentation of Proof of Keys Day from Bitcoin Magazine. Make sure to smash that like button and make sure to share this with your friends and family. Stack sats and stay humble, y'all. Peace.
There are many places to buy Bitcoin. They collect your personal information and jeopardize your privacy. KYC is the illicit activity. BISC is open source. It does not collect user data. You keep your private keys, create or take offers to trade peer-to-peer, and keep your Bitcoin private and secure.